Hello everyone. I just launched this channel and although views are still low, and I'm here to guide you through a relaxing evening. The podcast where we listen, unwind, and fall asleep. I know many of you rely on these tales to drift off to sleep, so I have been grateful if you'd settle in and watch this video before you get too cozy. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I am really hoping we can reach 1,000 subscribers very soon. Your support fuels my continued efforts. I would love to hear from you. Let me know. How do you feel about this? What are your thoughts? Where you're watching from and what time it is there. Reduce your stress by focusing on self-care. Allow yourself to rest and refuel if you are fatigued. Prioritize relaxation and breaks to avoid burnout and stay healthy. I hope you enjoy the stories we share and consider supporting the channel. Thank you for listening, supporting us, and hopefully making this podcast a regular part of your nightly bedtime ritual. My name is Henry and I am your host now. Get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let the tension melt away. The caller in the mirror. I still remember the first time he called me. It was past midnight, the kind of silence where even the crickets had fallen asleep. My phone buzzed, just once sharply, cutting through the stillness like a knife. Buds die. My heart skipped a beat as I fumbled for it on the nightstand. The screen lit up, casting an eerie blue glow on my face. Unknown number, it read. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the answer button. Late night calls from strangers were never good news, but something about it felt off. Not wrong, just unsettling, like a shadow flickering in the corner of my eye. I pressed the green button. Hello? My voice was shaky, barely above a whisper. A long pause followed, so long I thought the line had gone dead. Then a voice spoke. My voice. Do exactly as I say, and everything will be fine. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. The voice wasn't just similar, it was mine. Every inflection, every tone, identical to my own. My heart raced as I slammed the phone down, my palms slick with sweat. I told myself it was a prank, a cruel joke from someone who sounded just like me. But deep down, I knew better. The calls didn't stop. Every night, the same number, the same voice. Mine, horrifying. At first, it was just the calls. Then, things started to shift. My emails would send before I even typed them. I'd draft a message, delete it, and find it in my sent folder hours later. My reflection in the mirror would smile when I wasn't. Just a quick twitch of the lips, but enough to make me spin around, half expecting someone to be standing there. My friends noticed it too. They talked to me about conversations we never had. Hey, thanks for lunch yesterday, one would say. And I'd stand there, confused, as they described a restaurant I'd never set foot in. My cat, Luna, would hiss at my reflection, her fur standing on end as if she saw something I didn't. I tried to ignore it. I tried to move on. But then came the final call. It's time to switch places. Before I could react, the line went dead. And then, my reflection stepped forward. I was paralyzed. The mirror seemed to ripple, like water on a hot day, and suddenly, there he was. Me. Or at least someone who looked exactly like me. His smile was wide, too wide, stretching across his face like a crack in glass. He reached out, and I felt a cold touch on my shoulder. That's when everything went black. The next morning, everything seemed normal. The sun streamed through my windows, and Luna purred softly beside me. But something was wrong. My reflection in the bathroom mirror smiled at me, its eyes crinkling with amusement. Even though my face was expressionless, it wasn't just the mirror. My life wasn't mine anymore. My family treated me differently, as if I'd been acting strange for weeks. My mom mentioned a trip we'd supposedly planned to visit my grandparents, but I had no memory of it. My friends were worse. They'd laugh at jokes I didn't understand, their eyes lingering on me with an unease they tried to hide. One evening, I came home to find a journal on my desk. It was mine, the same notebook I'd used since high school, but the entries inside were about things I'd never written, plans I'd never made, conversations I'd never had. The final page read, "You are no longer needed." I tried to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. Days passed, and my name began disappearing from records. My bank account, my job, even my social media profiles. My reflection, however, was always there, watching, smiling, as if it had been waiting for this moment all along. The phone rang one last time. This time I didn't answer. Instead, I watched in horror as my reflection picked it up. Its voice, my voice, said, "Hello?" And on the other end, a voice whispered, "Do exactly as I say, and everything will be fine." This time, I wasn't on the receiving end. I was the one trapped in the mirror, forced to listen as my life was stolen piece by piece. And then, just like that, I was gone. But the calls never stopped. A new number, a new voice, a new life, and somewhere, in the darkness, someone else answered. The first call. It was past midnight when the phone buzzed, cutting through the heavy stillness of the night like a knife. Alex stirred in bed, reaching for the phone on the nightstand. The screen glowed with an unknown number, casting an eerie light on the small, cluttered apartment. The air was thick with the scent of old books and the faint linger of last night's tea. With a sigh, Alex answered, the phone pressed tightly against their ear. "Hello?" And a long pause followed, filled only by the faint crackle of the line. Then a voice spoke, Alex's voice. It was identical, mimicking the slight lilt at the end of words, and the faint drawl developed from years of living in the South. The words sent a chill down Alex's spine. "Do exactly as I say, and everything will be fine." The line went dead. Alex sat up, heart pounding, the phone still clutched in trembling hands. The room seemed colder now, shadows stretching across the walls like skeletal fingers. Trying to shake off the unease, Alex reasoned it was a prank or a wrong number, but the voice lingered in their mind. It had been too real, too familiar. Reaching for the lamp, a warm yellow glow illuminated the space, chasing away the darkness. Alex's reflection in the mirror across the room caught their eye. It stared back, unchanged, but for a moment it seemed to flicker. Shaking their head, Alex stood, the creaking floorboards echoing softly. Creak, creak, creak. The phone buzzed again, the same number. Heart racing, Alex hesitated, then answered. Silence. No voice, just the faint hum of the line. Then a whisper, soft and close, you can't escape. The call ended, leaving Alex breathless. Collapsing onto the bed, the weight of the night pressed down. Sleep eluded them, their mind racing with questions and fears. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. Tick-tock, tick-tock, a relentless reminder of passing time. Days later, things shifted. Emails sent before typing. Friends like Rachel mentioning conversations that never happened. At lunch, Rachel remarked on a shared joke from the day before. Confusion written across Alex's face. "You were there, right?" Rachel's voice was tinged with doubt. Alex nodded, forcing a smile, but the seed of unease was planted. That night, as Alex brushed their teeth, the mirror caught their attention. Water droplets clung to its surface, distorting the reflection. For a moment, it seemed to smile. Wiping the mirror clean, the reflection was normal, but the unease lingered. The mirror had been a thrift store find, its ornate frame whispering stories of past lives. Back in bed, the phone buzzed once more. Unknown number. Silence then. Soon. The line went dead. In the stillness, a faint whisper echoed in Alex's ear, though the phone lay silent on the nightstand. "You can't escape." The words hung in the air, a promise of dread. Sleep never came that night. Instead, the darkness held its breath, waiting. Messages from nowhere. It was a typical Tuesday evening when I noticed something amiss. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Mia. Hey, just wanted to say thanks for lunch yesterday. I was confused because we hadn't met up in weeks. I typed out a reply. Wait, I didn't see you yesterday, but before I had hit send, another text popped up. All right, you were busy. Maybe next time? My confusion deepened when I realized my typed message was gone, replaced by one I hadn't written. Yeah, let's catch up soon. I sent it, feeling a chill running down my spine. That night, I opened my laptop to write an email to my boss about a project deadline. The words I need an extension on the project were already there, as if I had written them in my sleep. My heart raced as I realized someone, or something, knew my thoughts before I did. The next day, I ran into my coworker, Lisa, who said thanks for the advice on handling the client yesterday. I had no memory of that conversation, so I brushed it off, thinking she might be mistaken. But as the day went on, more acquaintances mentioned interactions that felt like figments of my imagination. I confided in my older sister, Claire, who suggested I see a therapist, worried I might be developing schizophrenia. But I knew this wasn't in my head. Something was very wrong. That's when I remembered an old acquaintance, Emily, who had been obsessed with the occult. We had a falling out after she tried to involve me in a seance. It all clicked. She must be using black magic to invade my life. One evening, my cat Max was acting strangely, hissing at the mirror as if he saw something I couldn't. I cleaned the glass, but the ripples remained, like water on a still pond. The mirror seemed to be a doorway, and I felt a presence watching me. Determined to fight back, I sought help from a local herbalist, Mrs. Green, who practiced white magic. She gave me a protective charm and advised me to stay vigilant, but the occurrences escalated. My phone buzzed with calls from an unknown number, even when it was off. The silence was deafening, punctuated by my own voice whispering, "It's almost time." As the chapter closed, I found myself questioning reality and sanity, trapped in a nightmare where my life was no longer my own. The line between reality and horror was blurring, leaving me on edge, wondering what the next day would bring. The reflection that's wrong. The days blurred together, each one more unnerving than the last. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, a cruel prank orchestrated by someone who sounded uncannily like me. But the truth was harder to ignore with each passing night. It started with small things. One evening, while brushing my teeth, I noticed something odd. As I spat toothpaste into the sink, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. But my reflection didn't spit. It just stood there frozen, like a paused video. I wiped my mouth and turned away, telling myself it was a trick of the light. But when I glanced back, my reflection smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that I hadn't made. I spun around, but I was alone. The bathroom door was closed and the air felt thick, heavy with an unseen presence. My heart pounded as I reached for the light switch, flicking it off and then on again. The mirror fogged slightly, but when it cleared, my reflection was back to normal. Or so it seemed. That night, the voice called again. "Do you see it yet?" it asked, my voice low and smooth. "The cracks in the glass?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat felt tight, as if something had wrapped around it. "You're almost there," the voice continued. "Soon you'll understand." The line went dead, and I sat in the darkness, my phone trembling in my hand. The next evening, I was getting ready for bed when it happened again. I was changing into pajamas, and as I pulled my shirt over my head, I caught a movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned to the mirror. This time, my reflection didn't wait. It lifted its hand before I did. I froze, my shirt halfway over my face. The room was silent except for the creak of the old house settling around me. Slowly, I lowered the shirt, my eyes locked on the mirror. My reflection did the same, but there was a delay, like it was watching me, waiting for me to make the next move. Then it smiled again. This time, I screamed. I stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp. The sound echoed through the room. Crash! And my cat, Mr. Whiskers, darted under the bed. I didn't stop checking the damage. I ran out of the room, slamming the door behind me. Downstairs, I found my sister, Lily, sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I entered, her brow furrowed. "Hey, you okay? You look pale," she said. I hesitated. How could I explain what was happening? She'd think I was losing my mind. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just tired." She nodded but didn't look convinced. "If you say so. But maybe you should talk to Mom about this. She's been worried about you." I forced a smile. "I will, thanks." But as I turned to go back upstairs, I heard her mutter under her breath. "Or maybe I should talk to you." I stopped mid-step. "What?" "Nothing," she said quickly, waving her hand. "Just nothing." I sighed and continued up the stairs. My reflection was waiting, but it didn't move as I passed by. For now, it was still. The next night, the voice called again. This time I answered. "Hello?" I said, my voice was shaking. "You're almost ready," it said. "The mirror is the door. Are you ready to step through?" I slammed the phone down, my hands shaking. But as I turned to leave, I saw it. In the mirror, my reflection raised a hand. And then it stepped forward, the stranger in my life. The coffee shop buzzed with a familiar hiss of steam and the low hum of conversations. I sat across from Sarah, my friend since high school, her eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity. The aroma of coffee filled the air, but it couldn't mask the unease settling in my stomach. "We had lunch yesterday, right?" Sarah asked, her voice cheerful yet laced with an undercurrent of something else. Her smile was too wide, her eyes too bright, making her almost unrecognizable. I shook my head, confusion knitting my brow. "No, Sarah, I didn't leave my apartment yesterday. I've been getting these strange calls and..." She cut me off with a laugh, the sound grating against my nerves. "Oh, come on. You're just forgetting. We met at that new bistro downtown. You were wearing that green scarf, remember?" Her eyes bore into mine, challenging me to doubt my own memory. I opened my mouth to protest, but the words caught in my throat. Had I forgotten? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I knew I hadn't left my apartment, yet a flicker of doubt emerged, like a shadow in the corner of my mind. The next day at work, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting an eerie glow. I was reviewing the security footage when I saw myself, undeniably me, walking into the building at 9 p.m. But I knew I hadn't been there. I was home, pacing in my living room. My heart raced, the monitor blurring as I switched to another camera. There I was again, in the lobby, wearing a jacket I'd never owned. The world around me seemed to tilt, like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into an abyss. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I found myself walking home through the park. The air was crisp, the leaves crunching under my feet. Snap, snap, each sound magnified in the silence. The dog barked furiously as I passed, its eyes wild with fear, as if it saw something I didn't. Reaching into my pocket, my fingers brushed against something unfamiliar. A cold, metallic amulet. It felt ancient, etched with symbols that seemed to shift under my touch. A whisper echoed in my mind. A voice not my own, chanting in a language I couldn't understand. I dropped it, the metal clinking against the ground, the sound ringing like a bell in the stillness. At home, I leaned against the window, staring at my reflection. I stared back, unchanged. But the voice in my head grew louder, more insistent. My mind raced, thoughts tangled in a web of fear and confusion. Was I losing my grip on reality? The phone rang, shrill in the silence. My heart leaped as I saw the familiar number. I hesitated, then answered. The line was dead, but in the silence I heard my own voice whisper, "It's almost time." I slammed the phone down, the sound echoing through the room. The amulet glinted on the floor, and I felt a presence around me, a shadow hovering just out of sight. My breath came in short gasps, the walls closing in as fear wrapped around my throat. I was no longer alone, and whatever was taking over was making its move. The horror crept in, each moment more terrifying than the last, leaving me isolated and trapped in a nightmare of my own life. The call that shouldn't exist. The air felt heavy, like an invisible weight pressing against my chest. I hadn't slept in days, not since the call started. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. How could my own number be calling me? How could my own voice be on the other end, whispering things I couldn't ignore? I sat at my kitchen table, my laptop open in front of me. The screen glowed faintly, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I had decided to trace the unknown number. Maybe it was a prank, or maybe it was something worse. Either way, I had to know the truth. I typed furiously, my fingers trembling as I searched for ways to track the number. Every click of the keyboard echoed in the silent room. Finally, after what felt like hours, I found a website that promised to trace unknown callers. I hesitated, then typed in the number. The page loaded slowly, each second stretching into an eternity. When it finally did, my breath caught. The number wasn't just unknown, it was registered to my own apartment. My heart pounded as I read the words on the screen. Location, your residence. I slammed the laptop shut, my hand shaking. It couldn't be. I wasn't calling myself. That didn't make sense. But then, nothing about this situation made sense. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor, and walked to the window. The city outside was quiet, the streets empty. The clock on my wall reads 2:47 a.m. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe someone had hacked into my account. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't just a prank or a mistake. This was something else. Something darker. That night, I lay in bed, my phone beside me. I turned it off just to be safe. But as I drifted into a restless sleep, I was jolted awake by a low, muffled whisper. My heart leaped as I realized the sound was coming from my phone. I sat up, my breath coming in short gasps. The phone was still powered off, its screen black and unresponsive, but the whisper grew louder, clearer. It was my voice, my own voice, whispering my name. Hello, I said aloud, though I knew no one was there. The whisper stopped. The room fell silent. I waited, my body tense, but there was nothing. Slowly, I reached for the phone and turned it on. The screen flickered to life, and I saw a text message from the same unknown number. It's time to face the truth, it read. I dropped the phone, my hands shaking. The message had sent before I even touched the screen. The next day, I decided to confront the truth head-on. I couldn't keep living like this, in constant fear of what might happen next. I started by asking my closest friends if they had noticed anything strange. Had they received any weird calls or messages? Had they seen anything unusual? At first, they seemed confused. "What are you talking about?" one of them asked. But then, slowly, I saw the hesitation in their eyes. They knew something. "Just tell me," I demanded, my voice shaking. One of them sighed. "Okay, fine, we've been getting these weird texts from you," she said. "They're just random words, like hello or help. We thought it was a prank, but it's freaking us out." I stared at her. "I didn't send those texts," I said. "I swear." She nodded. "We know. That's why we're worried. Something's wrong and we don't know how to help you." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. If even my friends didn't believe me, who would? I left their house feeling more alone than ever. When I got home, I decided to investigate further. I searched every corner of my apartment looking for any sign of what was happening. That's when I found it, a small hidden compartment in my desk drawer. Inside was a journal. It wasn't mine. At least, I didn't think it was. The pages were filled with entries written in my handwriting, but I didn't remember writing any of it. The words spoke of dark magic, of rituals performed under the light of the full moon. They talked about summoning something, though I didn't know what. The final entry read, "He's almost ready. Soon the switch will be complete." I slammed the journal shut, my heart racing. Who was writing this? And what did they mean by the switch? I didn't have time to think about it. Suddenly I heard a knock at the door. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. "Who is it?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. There was no answer. The knock came again, louder this time. I hesitated, then slowly made my way to the door. I peered through the peephole, but there was no one there, just an empty hallway. I opened the door, my heart pounding, and that's when I saw it, a small package on the floor. It was wrapped in black paper, tied with a red ribbon. There was no note, no indication of who had sent it. I picked it up, my hands trembling. It was heavy, like something was inside. Something metal. I carried it back to the kitchen and carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a small, ornate box. It was locked, but I could feel a strange energy emanating from it. I turned it over in my hands, trying to figure out what it was. And then I heard it, a low, ominous hum, like something was coming to life. I dropped the box, my heart racing. It hit the floor with a loud thud. The humming stopped and the room fell silent, but I knew I wasn't alone. I could feel eyes on me, watching me. And then I heard the voice. My voice. "You can't run from this," it said. "It's already begun." I spun around, but there was no one there. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. I knew then that I was in grave danger. Whatever happened, it was beyond my control, and I had no idea how to stop it. All I could do was wait. Wait for the next call, the next message, the next sign of what was to come. But deep down, I knew the worst was yet to come, and when it did, I wouldn't be able to escape. The night of the switch. The storm outside had been brewing all day, the sky a deep, foreboding gray. By nightfall, the wind howled like a pack of wolves, and the rain lashed against my windows like fingers scratching glass. I sat on my bed, the room dimly lit by a flickering lamp, my phone clutched tightly in my hand. It was past midnight. Again. And then, it happened. The phone buzzed. Unknown number. My heart skipped a beat. For weeks, I had been ignoring the calls, deleting the texts, pretending it wasn't happening. But tonight felt different. Tonight, the air in my room felt heavier, like an invisible weight pressed against my chest. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. Something inside me screamed not to answer, to throw the phone across the room, to run. But my body felt frozen, my curiosity, or maybe my fear, forcing me to press the green button. "Hello?" My voice trembled. There was a pause, long enough for me to think I'd lost the connection. Then, the voice came. My voice, low, smooth, and terrifyingly calm. "It's time to switch." My breath caught in my throat. I tried to speak, but no words came out. The line went dead. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking so hard the phone nearly slipped from my grasp. The storm raged on outside, the thunder booming like a drum in my ears. And then, I saw it. My reflection. I'd been avoiding mirrors for weeks, ever since I noticed something was off. Tonight, though, I couldn't look away. The mirror on my dresser seemed to glow faintly, even in the dim light of the room. My reflection stared back at me, its expression calm, almost serene. But I wasn't calm. I wasn't serene. I was terrified. Slowly, my reflection's lips curled into a smile. I wasn't smiling. My heart pounded in my chest, my palms slick with sweat. The reflection's eyes gleamed, a mischievous spark I'd never seen in my own. Then, It moved. Its head tilted to the side just slightly. I didn't move. I couldn't move. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in on me. My reflection raised a hand, pressing against the glass. And then, impossibly, it stepped forward. The mirror rippled like water disturbed by a stone. My reflection emerged, its movements smooth and deliberate. It stood in front of me now, in my room, its presence filling the space with an icy chill. I could see the storm raging behind it through the window, but somehow it seemed unaffected by the chaos outside. "You," it said. Its voice was my voice, yet not my voice. It was deeper, darker, with an edge that sent shivers down my spine. "It's time to switch." I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My voice was trapped in my throat, suffocated by fear. The figure reached out, its hand cold and unyielding, and pressed it against my chest. I felt a jolt, a shock of electricity that ran through my entire body. My vision blurred, the room spinning around me like a carnival ride. And then, the world went black. When I came to, I was lying on the floor, my head pounding. The room was quiet now, the storm outside having passed. The lamp still flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I sat up slowly, my body trembling. Something felt wrong. I looked at the mirror. My reflection stared back at me, its expression normal now, but I could sense something different. A smirk lingered in its eyes, a knowing glint that made my blood run cold. I scrambled to my feet and grabbed my phone. It was dead, the screen black and unresponsive. But then something flickered. A face appeared on the screen, a distorted image of me, my eyes black as coal, my mouth twisted into a grin. I dropped the phone, my heart racing. And then I heard it, a knock at the door. "Come in," a voice said. It was my voice, but it wasn't me. The door creaked open and there I was. Or at least something that looked like me. It smiled, the same twisted, inhuman grin I'd seen on my phone. "You're no longer needed," it said, stepping inside. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I tried to scream, but again, no sound came. The world around me seemed to fade, the last thing I saw being my own face, smiling as it reached out to take what was mine. And then, everything went black. The other one takes over. The morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting a golden glow over the room. Birds chirped outside, their melodic songs a stark contrast to the eerie silence within. I woke up to the faint buzzing of my phone on the nightstand. It was a text from an unknown number. "Good morning." My heart sank as I recognized the number. My number. But I hadn't sent it. The screen glowed ominously, casting an unsettling light on my face. I tossed the covers aside, my bare feet touching the cold floor. The house was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the wooden beams. My cat, Luna, usually greeted me with a soft purr, but today she was absent. I found her in the corner of the room, her fur fluffed up, eyes fixed on the mirror. She let out a low hiss, as though something behind the glass had startled her. The mirror hung above my dresser, its surface flawless. I approached it cautiously, noticing a faint ripple, like water disturbed by a stone. "Hello?" I whispered, half expecting an answer. The reflection stared back, mimicking my movements. But as I turned away, I could have sworn I saw it smile. A sly, knowing smile that didn't belong to me. Downstairs, the air was thick with the scent of pancakes. My sister, Emily, was in the kitchen, her blonde hair tied in a ponytail. She was humming a tune, her cheerfulness forced. "Good morning, sis," she chirped, flipping a pancake. But her eyes, usually bright, seemed clouded, distant. I took a seat at the table, and as I reached for the syrup, I noticed my hand trembling. "You okay?" Emily asked, but her concern felt superficial. She was looking through me, as though I were a ghost. Luna sauntered in. her tail twitching. She hopped onto my lap, her eyes never leaving me. I stroked her fur, but her tense posture mirrored my unease. The morning progressed with an undercurrent of unease. At school, friends greeted me with familiarity that felt foreign. They mentioned inside jokes I didn't remember, their laughter echoing hollowly. I felt like an imposter, a puppet on strings I couldn't control. As the day wore on, the anomalies piled up. My emails were already drafted, the words foreign yet familiar. My phone buzzed with texts I hadn't sent, each message a fragment of my thoughts. How I was losing myself, my life a script I hadn't written. That night, I faced the mirror again. The reflection stared back, its smile widening. "You're almost there," it whispered, the voice echoing in my mind. Luna hissed, her fur standing on end. The mirror creaked, a sound like old wood splintering. The reflection raised a hand, pressing against the glass. I stepped back, heart pounding, as the mirror rippled like water parting. The voice spoke again, louder now. "It's time." My phone buzzed once, twice, the sound grating. I answered, but there was only static, a low hum that sent shivers down my spine. I was alone, the darkness closing in. The mirror's reflection smiled, a sinister grin that wasn't mine. Luna vanished into the shadows, leaving me face to face with the entity that had taken over my life. I realized then that I wasn't in control. My life was no longer mine. The voice grew stronger, more menacing. "You're done," it said, each word a dagger to my sanity. I was trapped in a nightmare with no escape in sight. The mirror seemed to pulse, drawing me in as the world around me faded into chaos. The vanishing. The darkness of the night was palpable, a heavy blanket suffocating the city. It started with small things. My name is missing from the office email list, my favorite coffee shop barista not recognizing my usual order. Each day, pieces of my life evaporated like mist in the sun. I tried to brush it off as a glitch, a mere inconvenience, but deep down, a chill settled in the pit of my stomach. One evening, as I walked home, the streetlights flickered, casting long shadows that danced ominously. I quickened my pace, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the stillness. Passing by a pet store, I noticed a stray cat watching me with piercing eyes, its tail twitching in an unnatural rhythm. It let out a low hiss before darting away, leaving me with a sense of unease. When I arrived home, I found my sister, Emily, pacing in the living room. Her face was etched with worry, and her usual warmth was replaced with a guarded distance. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low and serious. She mentioned how our parents had been acting strangely, as if they barely recognized me. My heart sank as she recounted a conversation where our mother referred to me as that person living in my apartment. It was as though I was a ghost hovering on the edge of my own life. I tried to reassure her, but she hesitated, glancing around the room as if something was listening. "There's something wrong. Something you can't see. I feel it too," she admitted, her voice trembling. Her words hung in the air, thick with unspoken fears. That night, as I lay in bed, the silence was oppressive. Then a faint knock echoed through the room. Knock, 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 slow and deliberate. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. Reaching for my phone, I saw no messages, no calls. The knocking stopped, replaced by an unsettling silence. I tried to sleep, but my reflection in the window caught my eye, its smile a stark contrast to my terror. Days passed and reality warped further. At work, a colleague mentioned a meeting I had no memory of, speaking of decisions I never made. My phone buzzed with texts I couldn't recall sending. My life was unraveling, threads pulled by an unseen hand. One morning I found an old journal hidden under my bed. The entries were written in my handwriting, but spoke of a life I didn't recognize. Meetings, people, places I'd never seen. The last page read, "The switch is complete. You are no longer needed." A chill ran down my spine as I realized I was no longer the author of my own story. As night fell, the phone rang, shrill in the silence. I hesitated, heart pounding before answering. The voice on the other end was mine, yet not mine, speaking with a sinister calmness. It's time to let go. The line went dead and the room plunged into darkness. When the lights flickered back on, I faced my reflection. It stepped forward, no longer confined to the mirror, its smile wide and menacing. I was frozen, paralyzed by fears. It reached out, its touch icy and real. In that moment, I understood. I was no longer needed. The world had moved on, my place taken by a shadow, a dark mirror of myself. As the darkness closed in, I realized I was just an echo, fading into oblivion. The last thing I heard was the sound of my own voice, now foreign, speaking words I would never say. And then, there was nothing. No name, no face, no life. I was gone. The one who answers. The clock on the nightstand read 12:14 a.m. The room was dimly lit by the faint glow of a charging phone. 16-year-old Lila stirred under her blanket. Her ears perked up at the sudden buzz of an incoming call. Her heart skipped a beat as she reached for her phone, her fingers trembling slightly. Unknown number, the screen read. She hesitated. Her parents had warned her about answering calls from strangers, but something about this felt off. The air in the room seemed heavier, as if the call wasn't just coming through the phone, but echoing in her mind. With a deep breath, she swiped to answer. "Hello," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. There was a long, uncomfortable silence. Then, a voice spoke. It wasn't just any voice, it was her voice. Identical, perfectly mirrored. Lila's blood ran cold as she sat up straight, clutching the phone like it might shatter in her hands. "Do exactly as I say, and everything will be fine," the voice said, calm and menacing. Lila's breath hitched. "Who is this?" she demanded, trying to sound braver than she felt. The line went dead. She stared at the phone, her mind racing. It had to be a prank. Maybe someone had recorded her voice and was messing with her. But the way the voice had echoed in her ears, it felt too real, too close. She tried to convince herself it was just her imagination and lay back down, but sleep didn't come. Every creak of the house made her jump. Every shadow on the wall seemed to move. And then, just as her eyelids began to droop, the phone buzzed again. Unknown number. This time, she didn't hesitate. She ignored it, tossing the phone onto the bed and burying her face in the pillow. But the buzzing didn't stop. It kept coming, call after call, each one piercing the silence like a knife. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed the phone and answered, her voice shaking with fury. "Who are you? Leave me alone." Again the same voice. Her voice. "You can't ignore me, Lila," it said. "I'm you. Or at least, I'm what you're becoming." Before she could respond, the line went dead once more. Lila's hands were shaking. She glanced around the room, half expecting to see someone standing there, but she was alone. Her cat, Luna, sat at the foot of the bed, watching her with wide, unblinking eyes. Layla tried to comfort herself by petting Luna, but the cat hissed and bolted out of the room. "What's wrong with you?" Lila muttered, but deep down she knew something was very wrong. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. Lila would find her phone open to apps she didn't remember using, texts she hadn't written, and then there were the mirrors. Every time she passed one, she could swear her reflection moved a fraction of a second after she did. It was subtle at first, but soon it became impossible to ignore. One night, as she brushed her teeth, she saw her reflection smile. She wasn't smiling. That was when the phone rang again. This time, she didn't answer. She threw the phone into her backpack and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. The cool night air hit her like a slap in the face, but it didn't calm her down. She walked aimlessly, her feet carrying her toward the edge of town, where the houses thinned out and the woods loomed dark and foreboding. It wasn't until she heard her own voice whispering in her ear that she realized she wasn't alone. "Turn back now, Lila," the voice said, "while you still can." She spun around, but there was no one there. The voice seemed to come from all around her, echoing off the trees. "Who are you?" she screamed into the night. "What do you want?" The only response was laughter. Her laughter. It sent chills down her spine. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet gave way, and she stumbled into a hidden ditch. Her phone fell out of her backpack and landed with a soft thud in the dirt. When she picked it up, the screen flickered to life, showing a text message she hadn't written. "I'm waiting," it read. Lila's heart pounded as she scrolled through her messages. They were all there. Every text she'd ever sent. But they were no longer in her voice. They were in someone else's. Someone who sounded exactly like her. And then it hit her. This wasn't just a prank. This wasn't just a weird coincidence. This was something darker. Something ancient. Her grandmother had once told her stories about curses and shadow beings, about entities that could mimic your voice, your face, your entire life. "They're called echoes," her grandmother had said, "and once they find you, they don't let go." Lila ran back to her house, locking every door and window. But the calls didn't stop. They came faster now, each one more menacing than the last. And then, one night, she found a journal hidden in her closet. It wasn't hers, but the handwriting was identical to her own. The first entry was dated 3 years ago. "I can feel it inside me," it read. The other one, "Waiting, watching. Soon it will be time to switch." Lila's blood ran cold as she flipped through the pages. The entries detailed her life, her friends, her classes, her deepest fears, but they were written in a voice that wasn't hers. A darker voice. One that spoke of rituals and shadows, of black magic and white lies. And then toward the end, the writing changed. It became erratic, the words bleeding into each other as if written in a rush. "It's happening," the final entry read. "I can feel it. The switch. The end. I tried to fight, but it's too late. I'm sorry, Lila. I'm so sorry." The journal fell from her hands. Lila knew then that she wasn't just being pranked or haunted. She was being hunted. By something that looked like her, sounded like her, but wasn't her. Something that wanted to take her place. The phone buzzed again. Unknown number. This time, she didn't hesitate. She answered. "Hello," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. There was a long pause, and then the voice spoke. Her voice. "You should have listened," it said. Before she could scream, the line went dead, and in the mirror across the room, her reflection stepped forward. Hey, the drowning deep. I still remember the first time I heard the legend. The thing beneath the waves. It was a story told in hushed whispers around campfires. A cautionary tale about Black Hollow Lake, a place where the water was as dark as coal and swimmers often vanished without a trace. Every summer, my friends and I would visit the lake, laughing off the stories as mere small-town folklore. But that all changed the summer Joe went missing. It happened on a warm, humid night. My friends, Miko, and Jane, and I were on Joe's old wooden boat, floating in the middle of the lake. The stars were dim, hidden behind a thick veil of clouds, and the air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and algae. We had brought a bottle of whiskey, and the night was filled with laughter and the occasional splash of someone diving into the water. Joe, ever the daredevil, had always been the first to jump in, daring us to follow. But that night was different. "Come on, Miko," Joe shouted, standing at the edge of the boat, his silhouette barely visible against the darkness. Afraid of a little water?" Miko hesitated, then grinned. "You go first." Joe didn't need to be told twice. He cannonballed into the water, the splash echoing across the lake. We waited for him to resurface, but the seconds ticked by, and the water remained still. At first we thought he was joking, hiding underwater to scare us. Then Miko jumped in after him. Miko's head broke the surface almost immediately. He wasn't smiling anymore. "Something's down there," he screamed, his voice raw and panicked. "Something's holding him." We didn't believe him at first, not really. But when Joe didn't come up, a cold dread settled over us. We called the police, and for 3 days they dragged the lake, searching for Joe's body. They never found anything. Then, a week later, we got the video. It came from Joe's phone, sent to all of us at the same time. The footage was grainy and distorted, the screen flickering as if something had interfered with the signal. All we could see was black water and the sound of heavy breathing. Then, Joe's voice came on, low and trembling. "It has me," he whispered. "It's taken me deeper." The screen flickered again, and for just a fraction of a second, we saw something. A face. It was human, but wrong. Too wide, with too many teeth and eyes that glowed like embers. The hunger in those eyes was unbearable. And then, silence. We thought Joe was gone forever. Until a month later, he came back. But Joe wasn't Joe anymore. At first it was small things. His smile was too wide, his laugh a little off. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes seemed to reflect the light like water. He never blinked, not once. But it was the way he talked about the lake that unnerved us the most. "It let me go," he told Miko one night, his voice flat and distant. "But it wants another." We didn't know what to do. Anne became obsessed with the local legends, poring over old books and talking to the townsfolk. She found stories of an ancient curse, a creature that lived in the depths of the lake, preying on the living. It wasn't just a monster. It was something older, darker, a being tied to the lake itself. Some said it was a demon, summoned by a cult decades ago. Others claimed it was a spirit, trapped and angry. But one thing was certain, it didn't let go of its victims easily. Jane started hearing things too, knocking on her window at night. At first, she thought it was Joe, but when she looked, no one was there. Then she started seeing shadowy figures lurking around her house. She tried to ignore it, but the knocking grew louder, more insistent. One night, she found webbed handprints on a bathroom mirror, glistening with lake water. And then, Jane went missing. We found her phone on the shore, half buried in the sand. The video showed Joe standing in the water, his smile stretching unnaturally wide. Something moved behind him, a shadowy form rising from the depths. "It's not Joe!" A text came from Jane's phone the next day. Just those 3 words. The lake was calm again, the surface smooth and untroubled. The missing posters started coming down, and the town moved on as if nothing had happened. But Miko and I couldn't forget. We couldn't shake the feeling that the lake was waiting, its hunger far from satisfied. One night, unable to resist, Miko walked into the water. He said he heard Joe's voice, calling him from the lake. I screamed for him to stop, but he just kept walking, his eyes blank, his movements mechanically. And then, he was gone. The last time I saw the lake, it was calm, reflecting the stars like a mirror. But I know the truth. The thing beneath the waves is still there, waiting. And it's always hungry. The dare that shouldn't have happened. Black Hollow Lake was the kind of place where summer nights stretched endlessly, where the stars twinkled like ice chips in a black drink, and the water, well, the water was always a secret. It was deep, darker than the sky above, and colder than it had any right to be, even in the sweltering heat of July. The locals called it cursed, whispering stories of swimmers who dove in and never resurfaced. They said the lake swallowed them whole like an open mouth in the middle of the woods. But we didn't believe it. Miko, Ann, Jane, and I had been coming to Black Hollow Lake every summer since we were kids. Our parents warned us, the townsfolk warned us, but the lake had a pull to it, like a magnetic force that drew us back year after year. It was our place, a spot where we could escape the suffocating small-town life and pretend we were invincible. This summer was different, though. This summer, Joe decided to take the dare too far. We were on Miko's old aluminum boat, anchored in the middle of the lake. The water was calm, mirroring the sky like a black mirror, and the only sound was the occasional clink of a beer bottle against the boat's edge. Joe, always the wild one, was leaning over the side, his toes curled over the edge as he stared into the water. His reflection stared back, distorted and ghostly. "I bet you won't do it," he said, turning to look at us with that reckless grin of his. His eyes gleamed with the kind of confidence that always got us into trouble. "I bet you're all too scared." The challenge hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown. Anne, ever the skeptic, rolled her eyes and muttered something about stupid dares. But Jane, quiet Jane, just shook her head and said, "Don't do it, Joe." But Joe wasn't listening. He never listened when he had a mind to do something. He stood up, swaying slightly because the boat wasn't as steady as he thought, and declared, "Watch this!" And then he jumped. The splash was loud, a sharp smack that echoed across the water. We leaned over the edge, laughing at first, expecting him to pop up any second, shaking his hair like a dog and grinning. But the seconds ticked by, and the surface of the lake stayed smooth. Too smooth. "Joe," Miko called, his voice tight with unease. "Joe, come on, man, this isn't funny." Nothing. Just a faint ripple of water where it had gone under. "Damn it," Miko muttered, yanking off his shirt and diving in after him. The water closed over his head with a gulp. We waited, our hearts pounding in our chests. The lake seemed to hold its breath, too, as if it were waiting to see what we'd do next. And then Miko broke the surface, gasping for air, his eyes wide with terror. "Something's down there," he screamed, his voice echoing across the water. "Something's holding him." We didn't believe him at first. We thought it was some twisted joke, Joe's way of proving a point. But then we saw Miko's face, pale and drawn, and the way he was clawing at the water as if something beneath the surface was trying to pull him back. "Help!" he shouted, his voice breaking. "It's got him! It's got Joe!" Panic set in. Anne started screaming, a high-pitched wail that sent birds scattering from the trees. Jane grabbed the phone and dialed 911, her hands shaking so hard she could barely hit the buttons. I just sat there, frozen, staring at the water as if I could Joe to come back up. But he didn't. The police came, their lights flashing on the shore, and dragged the lake for 3 days. They never found Joe's body. No one did. And though the locals nodded knowingly, as if they'd been right all along, we didn't talk about it. We couldn't. But then, a week later, the video came. It was sent from Joe's phone, though the police had already told us it was dead, waterlogged, and useless. The footage was grainy, distorted, like looking through a dirty lens. All we could see was black water and the sound of heavy breathing, labored and wet. And then Joe's voice, barely audible, whispering, "It has me. It's taking me deeper." The screen flickered, and for half a second we saw something else. A face. Human, but wrong. Too wide, too many teeth, too much hunger. Then silence. We thought Joe was gone forever. But a month later, he came back. Something pulls him under. The summer air hung heavily over Black Hollow Lake, the water's surface glinting under the moon like a vast, dark mirror. Joe, ever the rebel, stood at the boat's edge, his laughter echoing across the water as he dismissed the local legends. "Just old stories," he jeered, his voice carrying a bravado that didn't quite mask the tremble in his voice. With a dare from Miko, he plunged into the dark depths, his splash echoing through the night. Miko, Anne, and Jane watched their smiles fading as the moments ticked by. Joe's head didn't resurface. The water remained still, unbroken by ripples, as if swallowing him whole. Laughter died on their lips, replaced by an uneasy silence. "Joe, come on," Miko called, but the only reply was the distant hoot of an owl and the soft lapping of water against the boat. Panic set in when Miko dove in, the cool water enveloping him. He swam down, the pressure building in his ears, until he felt a cold, clammy hand brush against his leg. He thrashed back, breaking the surface with a gasp. "Something's got him," he screamed, his voice raw with fear. The group's frantic calls were swallowed by the night. The lake was silent, as if holding its breath. Anne's mind raced to the legends she'd researched, tales of a vengeful spirit, a curse born from dark magic. She whispered of necromancy and ancient wrongs, her voice trembling. Jane, ever the skeptic, felt a shiver run down her spine. The rational world she knew was slipping away, leaving her with a dread she couldn't shake. In the distance, a low growl echoed, like a vibration through the water, making her wonder if it was more than just the wind. As the night wore on, they called the police, but the search yielded nothing. Joe was gone, leaving only ripples of fear. The friends were left with unanswered questions, their bond fraying under the weight of the unknown. In the aftermath, Miko was haunted by nightmares, his mind tormented by visions of the dark depth. Anne delved deeper into the legends, uncovering a curse tied to her own family's past. Her grandmother had been one of the vanished. Jane began hearing whispers at night, a voice calling her name, leaving her questioning her sanity. The encounter had changed them, each carrying a piece of horror. As they waited for answers, the lake remained calm, its secrets hidden beneath the surface, waiting to claim its next victim. The darkness had only just begun to stir. The search for the body. The lake shimmered under the pale light of dawn, its dark waters disturbingly calm. The previous night's laughter and shouts were replaced with the hum of police boats and the murmur of worried voices. I stood on the edge of the water, my arms wrapped tightly around myself, as if the chill of the morning could seep into my bones. The air smelled of damp earth and something else, something metallic, like blood, though I couldn't see any. "This doesn't make sense," Miko muttered, pacing back and forth along the shore. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, and his usual confidence was replaced with a fractured nervousness. He was right there. 1 second he was swimming, and the next, nothing. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind kept replaying the moment Joe had disappeared, the splash of his dive, the ripples spreading across the water, and then nothing. No resurface, no call for help, just silence. "Where is he?" Jane whispered, her voice trembling. She was sitting on a rock, her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes fixed on the water as if willing Joe to rise from its depth. "Why isn't he coming up?" The police had arrived hours ago, their boats dragging the lake with hooks and nets. De Veras had been sent down, but they found nothing. No sign of Joe, no sign of anything out of the ordinary. Just water, endless black water. "He's gone," one of the officers had said bluntly. "It happens sometimes. The current, the depths. Sometimes people just don't come back." But we knew each other better. We had seen Miko's terror when he resurfaced, his face pale and his voice shaking as he screamed about something pulling Joe down. And then there was the video. Joe's phone had been found on the boat, the screen cracked but still functional. The footage was grainy, distorted, but unmistakable. The heavy breathing, the whispered words, and then the face. A face that wasn't human. Too wide, too many teeth, too much hunger. The police didn't believe it, of course. They called it a prank, a sick joke. But we knew what we saw. And now, Joe was gone. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the officers began to pack up their gear. "We'll keep searching," one of them told us, though his tone made it clear he didn't think they'd find anything. But for now, you kids should go home. There's nothing you can do here." Miko and Jane left, their heads bowed in defeat. But I stayed. I couldn't leave. Not yet. The lake seemed to hum with an eerie energy, as if it were alive. I shivered despite the growing heat of the day. My eyes scanned the water, half expecting to see Joe's face breaking the surface, laughing as if it had all been a cruel joke. But there was nothing. As I turned to leave, I noticed something strange. A faint symbol carved into the bark of a tree near the water's edge. It looked ancient, the lines twisted and unintelligible. I didn't recognize it, but it sent a chill down my spine. I took a picture with my phone, intending to ask about it later. Maybe someone in town knew what it meant. When I got home, my mom was in the kitchen, her hands moving quickly as she prepared lunch. She glanced up when I walked in, her expression softening when she saw my face. "Hey, sweetie, are you okay? I heard about what happened at the lake." I nodded, though I felt anything but okay. "I'm fine, just tired." She studied me for a moment, then returned to cooking. "You should eat something. You look pale." I didn't argue, though my stomach churned at the thought of food. I took a seat at the table, and my phone still clutched in my hand. I pulled up the picture of the symbol and sent it to my dad, hoping he might know something. He was a history buff, always tinkering with old books and local legends. Maybe he could shed some light on what it was. As I waited for his response, I opened my laptop and started typing. I couldn't concentrate on homework, not after what had happened. So I decided to research the symbol instead. I scrolled through pages of search results, my heart racing as I read about similar markings found near other lakes. Lakes where people had disappeared. Lakes where strange creatures were said to lurk beneath the surface. And then I found it. A page about Black Hollow Lake. About the people who have vanished over the years. About the thing they called the Drowning Deep. The words blurred on the screen as tears welled in my eyes. It was real. Whatever was in that lake, it was real. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. The creak of the house, the rustle of leaves outside, the distant splash of water. I lay in bed, my heart pounding as I wondered if Joe was still down there, if he was still alive. And then, just as I was starting to drift off, I heard it. A knock. Not at my door, but at my window. It came again. Tap, that bite. Tap, that got. Tap, that got. My breath caught in my throat. Slowly, I turned my head toward the window. The curtains were closed, but I could see a shadow moving on the other side. "Who's there?" I whispered, though I knew no one would answer. The knocking stopped. The shadow disappeared. But then faintly I heard a voice. Low.ni. Raspy.c. Speaking a single word. Anne. The video that shouldn't exist. The knock came at midnight, sharp and insistent. Anne's heart jumped as she pulled herself out of bed, her bare feet cold against the wooden floor. She had barely slept that week, her mind racing with thoughts of Joe and the lake. The police had given up, but she hadn't. None of them had. But when she opened the door, it wasn't the police. It was Jane, her face pale and her eyes wide, clutching her phone like it was a live snake. "Anne, you need to see this," Jane whispered, her voice trembling. Anne stepped aside, letting Jane in. Miko was already there, sitting on the couch, his eyes red from lack of sleep. "What is it?" Anne asked. But before Jane could answer, her phone buzzed in her hand. She froze, then looked at the screen. "It's from Joe," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But Joe had been gone for a week. The lake had swallowed him whole, and the police had found nothing. Nobody, no trace, just the endless, oppressive silence of Black Hollow Lake. "Open it," Miko said, his voice rough. Jane hesitated, then pressed play. The screen flickered to life, casting an eerie glow on their faces. The video was grainy, distorted, as if it had been filmed underwater. All they could see was the dark, swirling water and the sound. Oh God, the sound. It was like someone was breathing, heavy and labored, but it wasn't quite human. It was too wet, too gurgling, too wrong. "Joe," Anne whispered, leaning closer. "Is that you?" And then they heard it. His voice, low and shaking, barely audible over the breathing. "It has me," he whispered. "It's taken me deeper." The screen flickered again, and for a split second they saw something else. A face. It was almost human, but not quite. The eyes were too large, the mouth too wide, and the teeth, sharp and crooked, gleaming in the faint light. It was a face that shouldn't exist, a face that made their blood run cold. Then, silence. The video ended, and the room was left in stunned silence. "What the hell was that?" Nico breathed, his voice shaking. Jane shook her head, her eyes wide. "I don't know, but it's sent from Joe's phone. After he disappeared." Anne felt a cold sweat trickle down her spine. "We need to show this to the police," she said. But before anyone could move, Jane's phone buzzed again. She gasped, nearly dropping it. "It's another message," she said, her hands trembling as she opened it. This time it was just a text. 2 words, sent from Joe's number. "Help me." The room seemed to shrink, the air growing thick and heavy. Anne's mind raced. Joe was gone, but this felt real. Too real. She thought back to the stories, the legends her grandmother used to tell her about drowning deep. Her grandmother, who everyone thought was crazy, who they said had schizophrenia, but Anne had always wondered if there was truth to her stories. "We need to find out what's going on," Anne said, her voice firm despite the fear crawling up her throat. "This isn't over. Joe's still out there somehow, and whatever took him, it's not done yet." As she spoke, a knock echoed from outside. It was soft, rhythmic, like someone tapping on the window. Tap and tot. Tap, pedal. Tap a tot. Jane froze. "Did you hear that?" "No," Nico said, but Anne felt it in her bones. It was the same sound she had heard in her nightmares, the same sound her grandmother used to describe when she talked about the drowning deep. It was the sound of something ancient, something evil, something that didn't belong in their world. And it was getting closer. The night Joe came back. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a pale silvery glow over Black Hollow Lake. The water was calm, its surface reflecting the stars like a broken mirror. It was a peaceful night, the kind that made you forget the horrors that lingered just beneath the surface. But peace was something we hadn't known in weeks. It had been a month since Joe disappeared. A month after that grainy video arrived showing his shaky voice and the inhuman face that flashed on the screen. A month since the police gave up, dragging their equipment away and leaving us with unanswered questions. But then, he came back. I was sitting on the edge of the dock, my feet dangling above the water when I saw him. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow, a ripple in the water. But then he moved, stepping out of the darkness and into the moonlight. My heart stopped. It was Joe. He looked different. His skin was paler, almost translucent in the moonlight. His hair hung limp and wet, clinging to his scalp. But it was his eyes that caught me off guard. They were the same, yet somehow off. They had a peculiar stillness, like a pond after the ripples had settled. And his smile, too wide, stretching across his face in a way that didn't seem natural. "Joe," I called out, my voice trembling. I wasn't sure if I should be relieved or terrified. He didn't respond. Instead, he began walking toward me, his movements slow and deliberate. Each step echoed softly against the dock's wooden planks. The sound was unsettling, like the ticking of a clock in an empty house. Behind me, I heard Miko and Anne arguing. They had been staying at my house, all of us too afraid to be alone. "Jane, who are you talking to?" Anne called out, her voice sharp with worry. "Joe," I said, barely above a whisper. They stopped arguing. I heard their footsteps, heavy and hurried as they rushed to join me. When they saw him, they froze. "Joe," Miko said, his voice cracking. He took a step forward, then hesitated. "Is that you?" Joe didn't answer. He just kept walking, his gaze fixed on us. His eyes didn't blink, not once. That's when I noticed. His clothes were soaked, clinging to his body like he'd just crawled out of the lake. But it wasn't just that. His hands, they were wrong. The fingers seemed longer, the nails sharp and jagged. And his skin, there were marks on it, faint but unmistakable. Like gashes, healed but still visible. "Joe, what happened to you?" Anne asked, her voice barely steady. She stepped back, clutching her arms like she was cold, though the night wasn't chilly. Still, he didn't answer. He just kept walking, his movements unnervingly calm. When he reached us, he stopped. For a moment, no one said anything. The only sound was the faint lapping of the water against the shore and the distant chirping of crickets. Then, Joe spoke. "I'm back," he said. His voice sent a shiver down my spine. It was Joe's voice, but it was deeper, echoing like it was coming from somewhere else. "I came back." Miko took another step forward, his eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. "Dude, where have you been? What happened to you?" Joe's smile stretched wider, his lips curling up in a way that made my stomach twist. "The lake," he said. "It let me go, but it wants another." "What are you talking about?" Anne demanded, her voice sharp. "Who else would the lake want?" Joe didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked toward the water, his bare feet slapping against the dock. He stopped at the edge, staring out at the lake with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "Joe, come on," Miko said, trying to sound calm. "Let's get you home. Your parents." "I don't have parents," Joe interrupted, his voice cold and flat. "Not anymore." We exchanged glances. What was he talking about? Joe's parents had been frantic when he went missing. They had posters up all over town, and they'd even offered a reward. If Joe was back, they'd want to see him. But Joe didn't seem to care. He just stood there, staring at the water as if something beneath the surface was calling to him. "Joe, snap out of it," Anne shouted, her frustration boiling over. "You're scaring us." He turned to her, his eyes narrowing. For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in them, something ancient, something evil. Then it was gone, replaced by the same blank, unsettling calm. "I'm fine," he said, his voice returning to normal. Or what used to be normal. I need to rest." It was the first time he'd sounded like the Joe we knew. Relief flooded through me and I stepped forward, ready to hug him, to welcome him back. But Anne grabbed my arm, holding me back. "Don't," she whispered. "Something's wrong." I frowned, but hesitated. There was something about Joe that didn't feel right. His movements, his voice, his eyes, it all felt off. "Let's take him home," Miko said, stepping forward cautiously. "We'll figure this out in the morning." Joe didn't argue. He let Miko lead him away from the lake, his feet dragging as if he didn't want to leave. But as we walked, the tension between us was palpable. Anne stuck close to me, her hand clutched in mine, while Miko kept a wary eye on Joe. As we approached my house, I noticed something else. The crickets had stopped chirping. The lake was eerily quiet, as if it too was watching us. That night we stayed up late, trying to make sense of everything. Joe sat in the corner staring at the wall. He didn't say much, and when he did, it was always cryptic, vague. "The lake is alive," he muttered at one point. "It doesn't let go easily." When he finally fell asleep, we breathed a sigh of relief. But the relief was short-lived. I was sitting on the couch when I heard it, a faint scratching sound like nails on glass. I turned to Anne, who was sitting beside me, her eyes wide with fear. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "Hear what?" Miko asked, looking up from his phone. "That scratching. It sounds like it's coming from Joe's room." Miko frowned. "I didn't hear anything, but I did. It was faint, repetitive, like something was clawing its way out of the darkness. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the house made me jump. Every shadow looked like something lurking just out of sight. And when I finally drifted off, I had a nightmare of Joe, standing in the lake, his eyes black as coal, his mouth stretched into a grin that wasn't human. The next morning, I woke up to an empty house. Joe's room was spotless, the bed perfectly made. But on the mirror, there was a message, scrawled in foggy letters. "It's not Joe. He's not one of us anymore." The lake was calm that evening, its surface reflecting the golden hues of the setting sun like a sheet of molten bronze. Miko stood on the edge of the water, his toes curling over the damp soil. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves. It was peaceful, almost serene, but Miko couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. And then he saw him. Joe was standing farther down the shore, his back to Miko. He was shirtless, his pale skin glistening with water droplets, as if he'd just emerged from the lake. His dark hair clung to his neck, and his posture was unnaturally still. Miko's heart pounded as he called out, "Joe?" Joe didn't turn around. Instead, he knelt down, his hands cupping the water surface. Miko approached cautiously, the gravel crunching under his feet. As he drew closer, he saw Joe's reflection in the water. His face was the same, yet somehow different. His eyes seemed darker, his features sharper, as if the water was distorting his image. "Joe, what are you doing out here?" Miko asked, his voice trembling slightly. Joe didn't answer. He just kept staring at his reflection, his expression unreadable. Miko felt a chill run down his spine. Something wasn't right. He reached out to touch Joe's shoulder, but before he could, Joe finally spoke. "Do you see it, Miko?" Joe's voice was low, almost monotone, and it sent shivers down Miko's spine. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" "See what?" Miko asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Joe tilted his head slightly, his eyes never leaving the water. "The way it ripples, the way it calls." Miko frowned, confusion and fear swirling in his chest. "What are you talking about, Joe?" Joe didn't answer. Instead, he stood up, his movements eerily fluid, and walked further into the water. Miko watched in horror as Joe submerged himself up to his neck, his eyes still fixed on something only he could see. "Joe, come back!" Miko shouted, his voice echoing across the lake. "It's not safe!" But Joe didn't respond. He just kept staring into the water, his expression blank and unblinking. Later that night, Anne sat at her desk, poring over old books and newspapers. She had always been the skeptic of the group, but after Joe's disappearance and his eerie return, she couldn't ignore the strange feelings anymore. Something was wrong with Joe, and she was determined to find out what. As she flipped through the pages of an old diary, a name caught her eye: the Drowning Deep. It was an ancient legend, a tale of a creature that lived beneath the surface of Black Hollow Lake. It was said to have the power to manipulate the water, to lure swimmers to their doom with its haunting voice. But there was more. Stories of it taking people, only to return them changed, as if they were no longer human. Anne's heart raced as she read about the cursed ones, people who had been taken by the creature and returned with an unnatural affinity for water. Their eyes cold, their skin pale, their smiles too wide. They were no longer themselves, but vessels for the creature, sent back to lure others into its clutches. "Joe," she whispered, her voice shaking. "What did it do to you?" That same night, Jane lay in bed, her room bathed in the faint light of the moon. She had been having trouble sleeping, her mind haunted by the memory of Joe's face in the video, his voice whispering, "It has me, It's taking me deeper. She had tried to convince herself it was just her imagination, but the fear lingered. And then she heard it, a faint knock on her window. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Jane," a voice whispered, low and raspy. She sat up, her heart pounding. "Who's there?" she called out, trying to keep her voice steady. The knocking came again, louder this time, and Jane's blood ran cold. She threw off the covers and tiptoed to the window, her hands trembling as she pulled back the curtain. And there he was, Joe. His face was pressed against the glass, his eyes wide and unblinking, his mouth stretched into a grotesque grin. Water dripped from his hair, pooling on the sill. "Let me in, Jane," he whispered, his voice not quite his own. "It's cold outside," Jane screamed, backing away from the window as if it might shatter at any moment. She didn't stop until she was on the other side of the room, her back pressed against the wall. She could still hear Joe's voice echoing in her mind, and she knew. She knew that the Joe she once knew was gone. Something else was in his place, and it was far from human. The thing inside him. The evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over Black Hollow Lake. The water shimmered like molten gold, yet the beauty was deceptive, hiding the darkness beneath. Joe sat on the edge of the boat, his feet dangling above the water. His friends, Miko, Anne, and Jane, gathered around, their laughter echoing across the calm surface. But beneath the joviality, a sense of unease lingered. Joe, once the life of the party, had changed. His jokes felt forced, his eyes holding a distant, almost otherworldly glint. As the stars began to twinkle, he leaned in, his voice low and serious. "The lake is alive," he murmured, his words drawing their attention. "It lets me go, but it wants another." The group exchanged uneasy glances. Miko, ever the skeptic, smirked. "Dude, you've been watching too many horror movies." But Joe's expression remained grim, his usual charm replaced by an unsettling intensity. That night, Anne returned home, her mind racing. She tried to brush off Joe's words as mere fantasy, but the memory lingered. As she prepared for bed, a sudden chill gripped her. She turned on the bathroom light and her breath caught. On the mirror, glistening water droplets formed a handprint. Webbed fingers, each tip sharp and claw-like. The shimmer was faintly iridescent, as if from another realm. Anne's heart pounded. She reached out, her finger trembling as she touched the glass. The droplets were cold, and a shiver ran down her spine. She turned to leave, but heard a faint whisper, soft, raspy, and familiar, yet not quite Joe. The next day, Anne confided in Miko and Jane. They met at the old oak tree by the lake, the air thick with tension. Miko suggested it was a prank, but Jane was quiet, her eyes wide with fear. "What if it's real?" she whispered. As night fell, Joe reappeared by the lake, his presence drawing them in. His smile was wide, too wide, and his eyes glowed faintly in the dark. He spoke of the lake's hunger, his voice echoing with an ancient, ominous tone. "It wants another," he repeated, his words a haunting refrain. In the distance, a dog barked frantically, the sound sharp and insistent. Anne's pet Max appeared, growling low as he faced the lake. The water rippled, and a low, guttural whisper echoed, lapping water, a presence rising from the depths. The friends froze as Joe waded into the lake, his form silhouetted against the moonlight. Suddenly, Jane screamed. The water churned, and a shadowy form coalesced behind Joe, its presence massive and menacing. The friends stared in horror as the form reached out, its hand webbed and grotesque. In that moment they knew the truth. Joe was no longer their friend, but a vessel for something ancient and evil. As the entity began to pull Joe deeper, the friends fled, their hearts pounding. The lake's whisper echoed behind them, a haunting promise. "It wants another." In the aftermath, the group realized the legend was real. The lake was alive, and it was hungry. They vowed to uncover its secrets, to stop it before it claimed another soul. But as they parted ways, the night echoed with a familiar whisper, soft, raspy, and relentless. The entity's presence lingered, a reminder of the horror they face. The darkness closed in, and the friends knew their fight was far from over. The lake's curse was ancient, its power growing with each victim. They needed to confront the evil head-on, but the cost might be higher than they could bear. In the end, the lake's calm surface belied the terror beneath, waiting for the next soul to wander into its embrace. The friends were left with a daunting truth. In Black Hollow Lake, some secrets were better left unspoken. The final drowning. The night was heavy with an eerie stillness, the kind that made you feel like the world was holding its breath. The moon hung low, casting a silver glow over the dark expanse of Black Hollow Lake. Jane had been acting strangely for days, her eyes distant as if pulled by an unseen force. Miko and Anne had grown concerned, but nothing could have prepared them for the call that shattered the night. Jane's gone. Anne's voice trembled over the phone, slicing through the silence. She left her phone on the porch. There's a video. Miko's heart raced as he rushed to Anne's house. The air was thick with the scent of pine and something else, something metallic, like fear. When he arrived, Anne was pacing by the lake, her face pale. She sent me a text. Anne showed him the screen. It just said, "The lake is calling." They followed the path to the water's edge, the gravel crunching beneath their feet. The lake lapped softly, a rhythmic whisper that seemed to echo Jane's name. Near the water, Anne spotted Jane's phone half buried in the sand. Miko's fingers trembled as he picked it up, the screen flickering to life with a video. The footage was shaky, the camera capturing the dark water as if Jane had submerged it. Bubbles rose, each pop a stark sound in the silence. Then Joe appeared, standing in the water, his smile wide but wrong, like a mask stretching over his face. Behind him, a shadow moved, indistinct but ominous. "Look closer." Joe's voice was low, resonant, not his own. "It's waiting." The screen went black, but not before something else was there, a presence, ancient and cold. Miko and Anne exchanged a horrified glance, the weight of what they'd seen pressing down on them. The water lapped again, a sound that now seemed like a threat. "Jane's still out there," Anne whispered, determination steadying her voice. But deep down, they both knew. The lake had taken another, and this time, it wasn't letting go. As they turned to leave, a faint whisper echoed across the water, a name carried by the wind. Joe's name. Miko hesitated, a pang of guilt and fear. He thought he heard Joe's voice calling him, but it was just the wind. Or maybe it was something else, something that dwelled deep, waiting. The lake was calm once more, but beneath its surface, a horror stirred, patient and eternal, ready to claim its next victim. The last message. The air was thick with the scent of rain as Anne sat on her bed, her phone clutched tightly in her hands. The screen glowed faintly in the dim light of her room, casting an eerie shadow on the walls. It was late, past midnight, and the house was quiet, except for the occasional creak of the old wooden floorboard. Anne's heart raced as she stared at the message that had just popped up on her screen. Buzz died. Buzz died young. The sound made her jump. She hadn't heard from Jane in days, and now, out of the blue, this. "It's not Joe," the text read. Anne's breath hitched. She typed furiously, her thumbs flying across the keyboard. "Jane? Where are you? What's going on? This isn't funny anymore." She hit send, but the message didn't deliver. It just sat there, a small clock icon spinning endlessly. Anne's palms were slick with sweat. She grabbed her jacket and bolted out of the house, not even stopping to lock the door behind her. The lake was a 10-minute drive from her house, but tonight, it felt like an eternity. The roads were dark and deserted. The only sound was the crunch of gravel under her tires. As she pulled up to the lake's edge, she saw Jane's car parked haphazardly on the side of the road, the driver's door hanging open. Anne's heart pounded in her chest. "Jane!" she called out, her voice echoing over the water. There was no response. The lake was calm tonight, its surface mirroring the starry sky above. But there was something unsettling about it, something that made Anne's skin crawl. She stepped closer to the water's edge, her shoes sinking into the damp sand. Suddenly, there was a rustling sound, as if something was moving quickly underwater. Anne froze. The sound was faint but unmistakable. Something was moving just beneath the surface. She took a step back, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Then she saw it. A ripple in the water. Then another. And another. Something was moving toward the shore. Anne turned and ran, her feet pounding against the ground as she sprinted back to her car. She fumbled with the keys, her hands shaking so hard she could barely get the door open. She locked it behind her and started the engine, her eyes darting toward the lake. The water was churning now, waves crashing against the shore. And then, for just a moment, she saw a figure, tall, imposing, its presence filling the entire windshield. Anne screamed, slamming her foot down on the gas. The tires skidded for a moment before the car lurched forward, speeding away from the lake as fast as she could. She didn't stop until she was back home, the door locked and barricaded behind her. She sat on the floor, her back pressed against the wall, her phone still clutched in her hands. The screen was black now. No more messages, no more signs of life. But then, just as she thought she'd lost all hope, her phone buzzed again. Anne's heart leaped as she saw Jane's name on the screen. "It's not Joe," the text read again. This time, there was a picture attached. Anne's blood ran cold as she opened it. The image was grainy, dark, but unmistakable. It showed Jane standing in the water, her eyes black as coal, her skin pale and slick. Behind her, something loomed, something massive, something that didn't belong in this world. And then, just as Anne was about to scream, the line went dead. The phone dropped from her hands, shattering on the floor. Anne's breath came in ragged gasps, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't process. She knew, deep down, that Jane was gone. Whatever had taken Joe had taken her too. But as she sat there, the silence of the house suddenly felt heavier, more oppressive. Anne could swear she heard something, a faint knocking sound like someone tapping on her window. She didn't dare look. Instead, she crawled to her bed, pulled the covers over her head, and waited for dawn. The next morning, Anne found the courage to go to the police station. She showed them the texts, the picture, everything. But when they went to the lake, there was nothing. No sign of Jane, no sign of anything unusual. The lake was calm, peaceful, as if nothing had ever happened. And then a week later, Anne started hearing the knocking too. At first, it was just once a nightlight, almost imperceptible. But as the days went on, it grew louder, more insistent. She'd wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of someone, or something, tapping on her window. Anne tried to ignore it. She tried to tell herself it was just her imagination, just her grief and fear playing tricks on her mind. But deep down she knew. Whatever had taken Joe, whatever had taken Jane was still out there. And it was coming for her. One night she couldn't take it anymore. She crept out of bed, her heart pounding in her chest, and approached the window. When she pulled back the curtain, she screamed. There, standing in her backyard, was Joe. But it wasn't Joe. His eyes were black, like Jane's in the picture. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his smile was wrong. It stretched too wide, revealing too many teeth. "Let me in," he whispered, his voice low and raspy. "I'm cold." Anne backed away, her hands shaking. She knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that this wasn't her friend. This was something else, something ancient, something evil, and it had taken Joe's place. She didn't sleep that night. She didn't sleep for weeks. But every time she closed her eyes, she could hear the knocking. and every time she looked out the window, she saw him standing there, waiting, his black eyes fixed on her. Anne knew then that she had to get out of Black Hollow. She packed her bags, said goodbye to her family, and left. But even now, years later, she still hears the knocking in her nightmare. And sometimes when she's alone, she could swear she hears Joe's voice calling out to her from the lake. It's not Joe, she tells herself, but deep down she's not so sure. The one who remembers. The lake was still again. Its dark waters mirrored the moon like polished obsidian, and the surrounding trees stood silent, as if they too were holding their breath. The missing posters for Jane had begun to peel away, their bright colors fading as the town tried to forget. But forgetting was hard when the lake seemed to remember everything. Miko and Anne had tried to move on. They really had. But every time the sun dipped below the horizon, and the stars twinkled like ice chips in the sky, Miko would hear it, Joe's voice. Low, familiar, and yet different. It wasn't a shout or a scream. It was a whisper. A soft, steady call that seemed to carry on the wind. One night, Miko couldn't ignore it. He sat on the edge of his bed, his heart pounding in his chest like a drum. The voice was louder tonight, clearer. It sounded like Joe, but it felt wrong. It felt wet, like the words were bubbling up from underwater. Without thinking, Miko threw on a hoodie and slipped out of his house. His bare feet crunched on the gravel as he walked toward the lake. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and something else, something sweet and decaying. When he reached the shore, he stood there for a long time, staring at the water. It was calm, unbroken by even a single ripple. But then he heard it again, Miko. This time it was right behind him. He spun around, but there was no one there. His breath came in short, shaky gasps. "Joe," he called out, his voice trembling. "Is that you?" No answer. But then he heard the voice again, closer this time. "Miko." He turned back to the lake. The water was still, perfectly still, and yet he could feel it, something beneath the surface, watching him, waiting for him. Unable to resist, Miko took a step forward. The water was cold, shocking against his warm skin. He gasped, but didn't stop. Another step. Another. The lake floor was soft and spongy under his feet, like walking on a layer of rotting leaves. And then he felt it. A hand, cold and clammy, wrapping around his ankle. Miko screamed, but the sound was drowned out by the water as it closed over his head. The next morning, Anne found Miko's phone on the shore. It was waterlogged, the screen cracked, but somehow it still worked. There was a single text message on the screen, sent to her at 3:17 a.m. "It's not Joe." Anne stared at the words, her heart racing. She looked out at the lake. The sun was rising, casting golden light across the water. It was beautiful and peaceful, but Anne knew better. Something was still down there, waiting, watching, and it would never let go. The lake remembered. It always did. The unholy pact. I still remember the night it happened. I never believed in curses, demons, or the things that lurk in the dark, until I moved into that house. It was a simple place. 2 stories, creaky floors, an overgrown backyard. My mother told me it had been abandoned for years, but I got it cheap. Too cheap. The real estate agent had acted strangely, avoiding eye contact and muttering something about the house needing the right owner. But I wasn't superstitious. I didn't care about rumors. All I cared about was having a place to call my own, far from the arguments with my mother that had been tearing us apart for months. The first night was fine. Second, I noticed the doors wouldn't stay closed. No matter how many times I shut them, they'd creak back open. I wrote it off as the old house settled, but by the 3rd night the knocking started. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, always at 3 a.m. I ignored it, until I found the symbols carved under my bed. They were strange, ancient markings, deep into the wood, as if scratched by fingernails. My phone glitched when I tried to take a picture, the screen flickering with static. That was when I found the journal in the basement. It belonged to the last owner. The pages were torn, stained, the handwriting frantic. Do not answer the knocks. Do not say his name. If you do, he will come. My blood ran cold, because the last page was dated exactly 1 year ago, and scrawled at the bottom in fresh ink, "I am still here." That was when the lights flickered out, and from the hallway I heard footsteps, coming toward me. The house that waited. Emily stood before the house, her breath visible in the crisp autumn air. The once white paint was peeling, revealing weathered wood beneath, like the skin of an old, tired creature. The porch creaked in the wind, a low, mournful groan that echoed through the empty street. The garden was overgrown, weeds tangled around the remains of what once were rose bushes, their thorns reaching out like skeletal fingers. "Emily, are you sure about this?" her mother asked, clutching the car door tightly. Concern etched her face, deepening the lines around her eyes. "I've never been surer, Mom," Emily replied, her voice steady despite the shiver running down her spine. "It's perfect, and it's all mine." The real estate agent, Mr. Smith, hovered nearby, his eyes darting between Emily and the house. He fidgeted with the keys, his fingers trembling as he handed them over. "So, Miss Emily, if you have any questions, you know who to call." His voice was too cheerful, forced, and he avoided her gaze. Emily took the keys, the metal cold in her palm. "Thanks, Mr. Smith. I think I've got it." As he hurried away, Emily noticed the neighbors watching from their windows, their faces hidden behind curtains. The street was quiet, save for the rustling leaves and distant hum of a car. It was as if the house was an island, isolated and untouched. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. Sunlight filtered through grimy windows, casting long shadows that stretched and twisted on the walls. The floor creaked beneath her feet, a rhythmic groan with each step, like the house itself was sighing. "Emily, maybe we should talk about this," her mother began, following her into the living room. The room was bare, the walls stripped of paint, leaving patches of plaster exposed. "Mom, it's fine. I can fix this place up. It just needs some love," Emily said, running her hand over the back of an old armchair, the rough fabric and worn. Just then, her friend Matt appeared in the doorway, his tall frame filling the space. "You sure about this, Em? This place gives me the creeps," he said, his voice low and serious. Emily rolled her eyes, a smile tugging at her lips. "It's just old Matt. It needs some work, that's all." But as she said it, a chill ran through her. She felt it first in her toes, a cold seeping up through the floorboards. It spread, wrapping around her ankles, her calves, until she shivered. She glanced around, but her mother and Matt were busy unpacking boxes obliviously. "Let's get the rest of the stuff," Matt said, breaking the silence. "I'll go get the last box from the car." As he left, Emily's mother placed a hand on her shoulder. "I just want you to be safe, you know. This house, it feels off." "It's just settling, Mom," Emily replied, though her voice lacked conviction. Later that night, as Emily lay in bed, the house seemed to hum around her. The creaks and groans were louder, more insistent. She closed her eyes, trying to ignore the feeling of being watched. But the air felt heavy, pressing down on her, making it hard to breathe. And then she heard it, a faint whisper just as she drifted off to sleep. It was soft, indistinct, but it sent a shiver down her spine. She sat up, her heart pounding, but the house was silent once more. Probably just the wind, she told herself, lying back down. But the sense of unease lingered, a shadow in the corner of her mind. She knew she wasn't alone, not really. The house was waiting, patient and still, for something to begin. The knocking at 3 a.m. The first 2 nights were quiet. Too quiet. The creaks of the old house didn't bother me much. I told myself it was just the wooden bone settling, like an old man stretching his joints. But on the third night, something changed. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my phone casting a dim glow on the walls. It was 2:58 a.m. 2 minutes later, the knocking started. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, each one echoing through the house like a heartbeat in the darkness. My skin prickled. The sound wasn't loud, but it was distinct, as if whoever, or whatever, was on the other side of the door didn't want to be ignored. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. For a moment, I told myself it was just the wind or a stray animal. But then it happened again. Knock, knock, knock. This time, it was louder. The knock seemed to come from outside my bedroom door. My heart raced as I tossed off the covers and approached the door slowly. I pressed my ear against the cold wood. Silence. Who's there? I called out, my voice trembling. No answer. I opened the door a crack. The hallway was dark and empty. The air felt heavy, thick with an unseen presence. I stepped out, my bare feet creaking against the floor. The knocking didn't come again, but it didn't need to. I knew I wasn't alone. The next night, the knocking started again at exactly 3 a.m. This time, I didn't wait. I threw on a hoodie and rushed downstairs, yanking open the front door. The porch was empty. The street was silent. The only sound was the distant hum of crickets and the faint rustle of leaves in the overgrown backyard. I slammed the door shut and leaned against it, my heart pounding. But as I turned to go back upstairs, I noticed something strange. On the wall near the stairs, a faint scratch mark glowed in the dim light. It looked fresh, like fingernails had clawed at the paint. That's when I remembered the symbols. Under my bed, I found strange carvings earlier that day. They were deep grooves in the wooden floorboards, as if someone had spent hours scratching them into the surface. The markings looked ancient, twisted, and angular, like nothing I'd ever seen before. I had written it off as the work of a previous tenant, but now, staring at the scratches on the wall, I wasn't so sure. The knocking happened again the following night. This time, it was inside the house. It came from the walls, the ceiling, the floor. It was everywhere, and nowhere. I couldn't escape it. I tried to distract myself by scrolling through my phone, but the screen flickered and went black. When it turned back on, I had a text from an unknown number. It's starting. I didn't respond. I didn't dare. Instead, I went downstairs to the basement. The air down there was colder, heavier. I fumbled for the light switch, but the bulb flickered and died. In the darkness, I found the journal. It was tucked between 2 stacks of rotting boxes. The cover was leather, worn and cracked, and the pages inside were torn and stained. The handwriting was frantic, slanted as if the writer had been in a hurry. Do not answer the knocks, one entry read. Do not say his name. If you do, he will come. The last page was dated exactly 1 year ago. But at the bottom, in fresh ink, someone had scrawled, "I am still here." The words sent a chill down my spine. I wasn't alone. Whatever had been in the house before me was still there. And now, it knew I was here too. As I closed the journal, the lights flickered back to life. But it was too late. The knocking had already started again. This time, it wasn't alone. The symbols under the bed. The third night was different. It wasn't just the eerie silence that unsettled me, but the way the air felt heavier, like something invisible was pressing down on my chest. I had managed to ignore the knocking for 2 nights, but now, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every creak of the house made me jump. Every groan of the old wooden beams sounded like footsteps. I told myself it was just the house settling, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I tried to distract myself by scrolling through my phone, but the screen flickered oddly, like a static interfering with the signal. When I looked closer, the time on my phone read 3:00 a.m. Exactly. I froze as the familiar knocking echoed through the hallway. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. My heart raced, and my palms grew sweaty. I threw the covers off and stepped onto the cold floor, my bare feet making a soft creak as I moved. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt. No one answered. I approached the bedroom door cautiously, peering through the crack. The hallway was dark, the moonlight barely filtering through the grimy windows. I stepped out, my eyes scanning the empty space. There was no one there, just the faint echo of the knocks lingering in the air. I returned to my room, slamming the door shut behind me. But as I leaned against it, I noticed something odd. The bed, an old wooden frame, seemed slightly off. I pushed it away from the wall, and that's when I saw them. Strange, ancient symbols carved into the floorboards. They were deep, as if someone had scratched them with fingernails, and they looked fresh. Too fresh. My breath caught in my throat. I knelt down, tracing the symbols with my finger. They felt sharp, jagged, and they seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light. I pulled out my phone to take a picture, but the screen flickered again, this time going black. When it turned back on, I had an incoming call from an unknown number. My heart pounded as I hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" I said. My voice was trembling. No one replied. Instead, I heard a low, distorted voice, like static, repeating a single word. "Mine." My blood ran cold. I dropped the phone and scrambled to my feet, backing away from the bed as if the symbols might leap off the floor and grab me. That's when I noticed it. A faint, pungent smell like sulfur and rot filling the room. I grabbed my flashlight and hurried downstairs to the basement, determined to find answers. The air grew colder as I descended. The smell intensified. I fumbled through the dusty boxes until I found an old leather-bound journal. It belonged to the last owner, and as I flipped through the pages, the handwriting grew more frantic, the words spilling across the paper in a mad scramble. "Do not answer the knocks. Do not say his name. If you do, he will come." The last page was dated exactly 1 year ago, and at the bottom, in fresh ink, someone had scrawled, "I am still here." My heart stopped. The lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. I froze, the flashlight slipping from my hand. And then, from the hallway, I heard footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps, coming toward me. The journal of the damned. The air in the basement was thick and heavy, like breathing through a wet sponge. Dust motes floated lazily in the faint light of my flashlight, settling on old boxes and forgotten trinkets. I had been avoiding this part of the house since I moved in, but the knocking and the symbols under my bed had pushed me down here. The basement smelled of mildew and something else, something sharp, like ozone after a storm. I shuffled through the cobwebs, my sneakers kicking up clouds of dust. In the corner, under a pile of yellowed newspapers, something caught my eye. It was a book, leather-bound and worn, its edges cracked with age. I picked it up, blowing off the dust, and opened it. The pages were filled with handwriting, but not just any handwriting. It was messy, erratic, as if the writer had been in a panic. The ink bled in places, and some words were underlined so hard they tore the paper. I flipped through the pages, my heart pounding in my chest. October 12th, the first entry was dated a year ago. The writer talked about hearing noises, faint whispers at first, then the knocking. My breath hitched as I read those words, the same knocking I had heard. The writer had dismissed it as the house settling, just like I had. But as the entries progressed, the tone changed. The writing grew more frantic. The sentences were disjointed. The writer started talking about shadows moving out of the corner of their eye, about doors slamming shut on their own. They mentioned the symbols, too, how they had found them etched into the walls, the floor, even the ceiling. They had tried to scrub them away, but they always came back. And then halfway through the journal, the writer's tone shifted entirely. They stopped talking about the house and started talking about him. Hey is here, one entry read. I can feel him. He wants me to let him out. I want. My hands trembled as I turned the page. The next entry was shorter, just 2 sentences. I tried to leave, but the doors won't open. He is in the walls. I flipped to the last page. The final entry was dated exactly 1 year ago. The handwriting was barely legible, the words scribbled in a rush. He's coming. I can hear the knocking 3 times, always 3 times. I have to hide. I have to. The sentence cut off abruptly, the pen scratching across the page in a wild, jagged line. Below it, in fresh ink, someone had scrawled, I am still here. The words leaped off the page, making my blood run cold. I slammed the journal shut, my heart racing. But as I did, the flashlight in my hand flickered once, twice, and then went out. The basement was pitch black. I froze, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Light, deliberate, coming from the stairs. My throat tightened as I whispered, Who's there? No one answered. The footsteps stopped at the bottom of the stairs right behind me. I could feel a presence, something cold and heavy in the air. Slowly I turned around, but there was nothing there. Or so I thought. And then I heard it. A low, raspy voice, so soft it might have been my imagination. It said one word, mine I too old. I dropped the journal and ran, my feet pounding the creaky stairs as I sprinted back to the main floor. I slammed the basement door shut behind me and leaned against it, my hands shaking so hard I could barely grip the doorknob. I didn't stop moving until I was back in my bedroom, the door locked, and a chair wedged against it. I sat on the bed, my phone clutched in my hands, but I didn't know who to call. The police? My mom? Who would believe me? As I sat there, the journal's last words echoed in my head. He is in the walls. I wanted to tell myself it was just a story, a ramblings of some crazy person. But deep down, I knew better. The knocking at 3 a.m., the symbols, the voice in the dark. He was real, and he was still there. The voice in the static. The night had been quiet until then. No knocks, no creaks, no shadows darting in the corners of my vision. I had almost convinced myself it was all in my head, a side effect of moving into a place that felt too big, too empty, too old. But then at 2:47 a.m. the static started. I wasn't asleep. Insomnia has become my new normal since moving in. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, when a low crackle filled the room. It was faint at first, like the distant hum of a TV left on in another house. But it grew louder, sharper, until it sounded like someone was running their nails over a chalkboard in my bedroom. My radio. It was an old thing, sitting on my nightstand, unplugged. I remembered unplugging it. I had no use for it since my phone did everything. But now, the speaker seemed to vibrate with the static, spitting out bursts of white noise that made my teeth ache. I sat up, my heart pounding. What the hell? I muttered, reaching for the radio to turn it off. But when my fingers brushed the dial, the static stopped. Complete silence. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. Then, a whisper. Low, raspy, and impossibly close. It said my name. Ethan. My blood ran cold. I jerked my hand back as if the radio had burned me. The static returned, louder now, and the whisper came again, clearer this time. Ethan. 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 I threw the covers off and stumbled out of bed, my legs trembling. The voice wasn't just coming from the radio. It seemed to fill the room, echoing off the walls. I fumbled for my phone on the nightstand, my fingers clumsy with fear, and pulled up the flashlight app. The beam of light was weak, but it was enough to see that I was alone. The static stopped again. The silence was worse. I glanced at the mirror hanging on the wall across from my bed. It was an old thing, with a cracked frame and glass that distorted my reflection. But what I saw made my breath hitch. My reflection wasn't moving. Not exactly. When I turned my head, it turned too, just a second too late. It was subtle, but enough to make my stomach twist with dread. I took a step back, my eyes glued to the mirror. My reflection's mouth opened, just a little, as if to say something. But I didn't speak, and neither did it. Not yet. The static roared back to life so loud it hurt my ears. I clapped my hands over them, but I could still feel the vibrations of the sound in my bones. Then the whispers. They weren't just saying my name anymore. They were laughing, a low, guttural sound that didn't seem human. It was a sound that made me want to crawl out of my skin. Suddenly, the static cut out again. The room fell silent. The mirror seemed to ripple, like water disturbed by a stone, and then it stilled. I stood there, frozen, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. After what felt like an eternity, I worked up the courage to turn on the overhead light. The brightness chased the shadows away, and for a moment, I felt safe. But when I looked at the mirror again, I could have sworn my reflection flickered. Just for a second, just enough to make me question my sanity. I didn't sleep after that. I didn't even try. When the first light of dawn crept through the blinds, I was already dressed, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. My phone lay in front of me, open to a search page filled with articles about haunted houses, electronic interference, and, though I hated to admit it, demonic possession. I didn't believe in any of that. I still didn't, but I couldn't explain what had happened. The radio hadn't been plugged in. There was no one else in the house. And yet, I had heard my name. I had seen my reflection move on its own. The coffee was bitter on my tongue as I took a sip. It wasn't helping. My mind raced, piecing together fragments of what I'd read in the journal. The last owner had written about voices too, whispers in the night, and the symbols under the bed. I couldn't stop thinking about them. They looked fresh, like they'd been carved yesterday. But the journal was years old. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 6:05 a.m. The house was quiet now, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way. The knocking would start again tonight, and I had no idea what would happen when it did. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. It rang 4 times before someone answered. "Hey, Ethan, it's, 6 in the morning. It was my old friend, Matt. We'd fallen out of touch after high school, but he'd always been the guy who believed in ghosts, demons, and every conspiracy theory under the sun. If anyone could help me make sense of this, it was him. Matt," I said, my voice shaking. "I need your help. Something's going on in this house. I think it's haunted." There was a pause at the other end of the line. Then, very seriously, he said, "Tell me everything." The black magic ritual. The air in the basement was thick, heavy with the scent of decay and something else. Something metallic, like old blood. I fumbled with the flashlight on my phone, the weak beam of light flickering over the cobweb-covered walls. The journal lay open on the dusty floor, its pages yellowed and torn. But the words were clear enough to send a chill down my spine. "They came here to summon it," I read aloud, my voice echoing in the small space. "A group of them thinking they could control it, but they didn't understand. You can't control what you don't comprehend." The words were scribbled in a handwriting that grew more erratic with each line, as if the writer had been in a rush or afraid. I turned the page, the paper crackling under my fingers. There was a sketch of a circle, symbols etched around it. They looked like the ones I'd found under my bed. "This house was never just a house," the journal continued. "It was a vessel, a gateway. They thought they could open the door and slam it shut again. But once it's open, it never truly closes." I felt a cold draft sweep past me, though the window was shut. My breath came in short, sharp, gasps. The writer had gone into detail about the rituals, how they gathered materials, chants, and sacrifices. The air in the basement seemed to grow colder as I read, the shadows twisting around me. I tried to warn them, the journal said. I told them it wasn't worth the risk, that what they were calling wasn't meant to be summoned, but they wouldn't listen. They never listened. The next page was stained with something dark, the ink smeared as if someone had cried while writing. It came, the words read. It came and they weren't prepared. They thought they could trap it, bind it, but it laughed. It laughed and it took them, one by one. Now it's still here, waiting, watching. I slammed the journal shut, my heart pounding in my chest. The flashlight on my phone flickered once, twice, and then went out. I was plunged into darkness, the sudden blackness suffocating. I froze, my ears straining to pick up any sound. The house creaked, the floorboards groaning like an old man shifting in his sleep. Then came the knock. 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 Honey. Knock. Knock. It was loud, deliberate, and it came from right behind me. I spun around, fumbling for my phone, but the screen remained dark. My breath came in ragged gasps as I backed away, my hands trembling. The knocking came again, this time from the wall to my left. Then the ceiling, then the floor. It was everywhere, the sound echoing in a way that didn't feel natural. Who's there? I called out, my voice shaking. I didn't expect an answer, but I had to say something. The knocking stopped. The silence was even worse. I could feel eyes on me, boring into my skin. I turned and ran, the stairs creaking under my feet as I bolted back to the safety of my bedroom. I slammed the door shut, leaning against it as if something might try to push its way through. The knocking started again, this time from the hallway. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Exactly at 3 a.m. I bit my lip to keep from screaming. The words from the journal echoed in my head. If you do, he will come. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every sound, every creak of the house made me jump. By morning I was exhausted, my mind racing. I needed to know more. I needed to know what had happened in this house and what was still lingering in the walls. The real estate agent had been oddly tightly-lipped about the house's history. Now, I knew why. But I had to uncover the truth. I spent the day researching, digging through old records and talking to neighbors. What I found was disturbing. The house had a history of disappearances, people who'd moved in and then vanished without a trace. The police had never found anything, no signs of struggle or foul play. It was as if they'd been swallowed by the house itself. By nightfall, I was sitting in the living room, the journal opened on the coffee table. The knocking had started again, louder this time, and I could feel it vibrating through the floorboards. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just the house settling, but deep down I knew better. The air in the room shifted, the shadows deepening into something darker, something alive. I could feel it watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. The knocking grew louder, more insistent, and I knew I was running out of time. Whatever was on the walls, it wasn't leaving, and it wanted me to know that I was next. The thing in the hallway? That night I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was as if unseen eyes were peering through the cracks in the walls, their gaze cold and unyielding. The air felt heavier, thick with an ominous presence that made each breathe a chore. I tried to distract myself by scrolling through my phone, but the silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the occasional creak of the old house settling around me. At 3 a.m., the knocking started again, louder this time, reverberating through the walls like an ominous drumbeat. My heart raced as I clutched the blankets tighter, my mind screaming at me to ignore it, to stay in bed. But the knocks grew more insistent, each one echoing through the house with a relentless cadence. Suddenly I heard breathing. It was soft at first, but it grew louder, more deliberate. It was right outside my door. My blood ran cold as I sat up, my ears straining to pinpoint the sound. The breathing was deep, almost like a growl, sending shivers down my spine. I had to see what it was. With a trembling hand, I reached for my phone to use as a flashlight, my fingers numb and unresponsive. As I approached the door, the breathing stopped. The silence was deafening, more terrifying than any sound could be. I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob, my mind urging me to step back. But I had to know. Slowly, I turned the knob and pushed the door open, a creak echoing through the hallway. The darkness seemed to swallow me whole. My phone's light flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. And then I saw it, a shadow, tall and impossibly thin, standing at the end of the hall. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, but its presence filled the space with an unspeakable horror. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The shadow seemed to pulse with a life of its own, its edges twitching and writhing like living darkness. Then it moved. It didn't walk, it glided, its form shifting as if it were part of the night itself. I slammed the door shut, my heart pounding in my chest. I leaned against it, trying to catch my breath, but my mind was a whirlwind of fear and confusion. This wasn't just a ghost, it was something ancient, something evil that had been awakened by some dark ritual. As I sat on the bed, the knocking started again, this time more frantic, more urgent. I knew then that I wasn't alone in the house, and whatever was out there, it wanted me to know it was coming for me. The thought sent a wave of panic through me. I grabbed my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed a number. It was my best friend, Sarah. She answered on the first ring, her voice sleepy, but concerned when she heard my frantic breaths. "What's wrong?" she asked, immediately alert. "I need you to come over," I pleaded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Something's in the house." There was a pause, and for a moment I wondered if she believed me. "I'll be right there," she said finally. "Stay on the line." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "Hurry," I whispered. As I waited, the knocks grew louder, more insistent. I could feel the vibrations through the floor, a relentless reminder that whatever was out there wasn't going away. The air in the room grew colder, the shadows twisting into grotesque shapes on the walls. Then the breathing started again, right outside my door. My grip on the phone tightened as I heard Sarah's car pull up outside. "I'm here," she said, her voice firm. "Stay inside. I'll come in through the front door." I nodded, though my eyes were fixed on the door. The breathing stopped as I heard Sarah enter the house, her footsteps light but determined. "Jess?" she called out, her voice echoing through the hallway. "In here!" I shouted back, relief washing over me as I heard her approach. The door creaked as she pushed it open, her flashlight casting a beam of light through the room. "Jess, what's going on?" she asked, her voice soft with concern. I tried to explain, but the words caught in my throat. Before I could speak, a knock echoed through the house, loud and clear. Sarah's eyes widened as she stared at me, her face pale. "What was that?" she whispered. I shook my head, fear gripping me like a vice. "It's been happening every night, and there's something in the hallway." Sarah's grip on her flashlight tightened. "Let me check," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. As she stepped into the hallway, the darkness seemed to swallow her whole. The flashlight's beam wavered, and then went out, plunging the hall into darkness. I heard a scream, sharp and terrified, and then silence. "Sarah?" I called out, my voice trembling. There was no answer. I had to move. I pushed open the door, my heart pounding, and stepped into the hallway. The darkness was absolute, but I could feel a presence around me, a cold, malevolent force that seemed to press in on me from all sides. And then I heard the knocking again. It was right in front of me, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves. I reached out, brushing my hand against something cold and hard. As I stumbled back, my hand knocked against the light switch. The lights flickered on, revealing the hallway in all its eerie glory. But Sarah was gone. In her place was a note, taped on the wall. It read, "I am still here." And then everything went black. the pact that must be completed. The house was quiet that night, but the silence felt heavier than usual. I sat at the kitchen table, the flickering light of a single candle casting long shadows across the walls. The journal lay open in front of me, its yellowed pages filled with the frantic scribbles of the last owner. My fingers trembled as I turned the pages, each word painting a picture of desperation and fear. The journal spoke of an entity, something ancient and malevolent, trapped within the walls of the house. It had been summoned years ago, during a dark ritual performed by a previous owner. The ritual had gone wrong, and the entity had been left tethered to the house, unable to escape. But it needed someone to take its place, to become its anchor in the mortal world. And now, I was the one who had unknowingly stepped into that role. I tried to push the thought away, but it clung to me like a cold, damp shroud. The knocking had grown louder. The symbols under my bed seemed to pulse with a strange, otherworldly energy. And the whispers in the radio had grown clearer, more insistent. It was all leading to this moment, to the realization that I was trapped in a pact I had never agreed to. A knock at the door broke the silence. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't the 3 slow knocks I had grown accustomed to. It was a quick, nervous rap. I hesitated, then got up to answer it. It was my best friend, Sarah, standing on the porch with a look of concern etched on her face. She'd been calling me nonstop for days, but I had ignored her, unable to explain the strange occurrences in the house. Now she had shown up unannounced, determined to find out what was wrong. "Hey," she said softly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I've been worried about you. You've been ignoring my calls, and your mom said you've been acting weird. What's going on?" I sighed, unsure of how to explain. How could I tell her about the entity, the knocking, the journal? She would think I was crazy just like everyone else would. But then again, maybe she would believe me. Sarah had always been the rational one, the one who looked for logical explanations. But she had also always been there for me, no matter what. "It's the house," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "Something's wrong with it. I think it's haunted." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Haunted? You don't believe in ghosts? You've always said it's just people's imaginations running wild." I shook my head. "I know what I said, but this is different. There's something here, something that doesn't want me to leave. It's been trying to communicate with me, to make me do something." Sarah's expression softened, and she reached out to place a hand on my arm. "You're scaring me. Let's get out of here, okay? We'll go to your mom's place and we can figure this out together." But it was too late. The knocking started again, louder than before, and this time it wasn't just at the door. It was in the walls, the floor, the ceiling. It was everywhere. Sarah's eyes widened in fear as she stepped back, her hand still on my arm. "What is that?" she whispered. I didn't have the chance to answer. The lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. The knocking stopped, and for a moment, there was silence. Then a low, guttural voice spoke, echoing through the house. "I am here," it growled, "and you cannot leave." Sarah gasped, her grip on my arm tightening. "What was that?" she whispered. I didn't answer. I knew what it was. It was the entity, finally making itself known. And it was coming for us. The air grew colder, the darkness pressing around us like a living thing. I could feel its presence, heavy and oppressive, filling the room. And then I saw it. A shadow, tall and impossibly thin, standing just beyond the edge of the candlelight. "Run," I whispered, grabbing Sarah's hand and pulling her toward the stairs. But it was too late. The shadow moved, its form shifting and writhing like a living thing. It reached out, its hand elongating, stretching until it was just inches from my face. I could feel its breath, cold and rank, as it leaned in closer. And then everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the floor, my head throbbing with a sharp, pulsating pain. The house was quiet again, the only sound the faint creak of the old wooden floorboards beneath me. Sarah was nowhere to be found, and the journal was missing. I stumbled to my feet, my heart racing as I called out for her. But there was no answer. The house was empty, or at least it seemed that way. I knew the truth, though. The entity was still here, watching, waiting, and it had taken Sarah. I staggered through the house, my mind racing with thoughts of what I could do. I had to save her, but I had no idea how. The entity was powerful, and I was just one person, alone and scared. But I couldn't give up. Not now. Not when Sarah's life was at stake. I reached the basement, my hands shaking as I fumbled for the light switch. The light flickered on, revealing the symbols carved into the walls. They seemed to pulse with dark, malevolent energy, and I could feel their power calling to me. I knew what I had to do. The journal had mentioned a ritual, a way to banish the entity back to whatever hell it had come from. But I also knew the risks. If I failed, the entity would be free, and I would be trapped in this house forever. But I had no choice. I had to try. I gathered what I could from the journal, piecing together the words and symbols needed for the ritual. My hands trembled as I drew the symbols on the floor, my voice shaking as I recited the words. The air grew colder, the darkness pressing around me, but I kept going, driven by the thought of saving Sarah. And then, just as I finished the final word, the room erupted in a blinding flash of light. I felt a surge of energy, hot and electric, coursing through my veins. The symbols on the floor glowed with an intense, white light, and I could feel the entity's presence, angry and powerful, fighting against me. But I held firm, my voice rising as I repeated the words over and over, until the light faded and the energy dissipated. The room was silent once more, and I collapsed to the floor, exhausted. I waited, holding my breath, hoping that it had worked. And then, I heard it. Footsteps, light and quick, coming from the stairs. I looked up, and there was Sarah, standing in the doorway, her eyes wide with fear. "Are you okay?" I asked, scrambling to my feet and rushing toward her. She nodded, her voice trembling. "Yeah, I think so. I don't know what happened. One minute I was here, and the next, I don't know. It was like I was somewhere else, somewhere dark and cold." I pulled her into a tight hug, relief washing over me. "It's over," I said. "The entity is gone. We're safe now." But as I held her, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. The house felt different, the air lighter, but there was still a lingering sense of unease. And then, as we turned to leave, I saw it. A symbol, carved into the wall, fresh and raw. It was the same symbol that had been under my bed, the same symbol that had been in the journal. And beneath it in fresh ink was a single word, mine. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The entity was still here, trapped in the walls, waiting. And now, it had a new anchor, a new person to take its place. Me. Sarah noticed my expression and followed my gaze. "What is that?" she asked, her voice trembling. I didn't answer. I knew what it meant. The entity had chosen me, and now I was the one who was trapped. The house had waited for me, and now I was its. And as the realization hit me, the lights went out once more, and the knocking started again, louder than ever before. This time, there was no escape. The night of no escape. I sat in the dim glow of my bedroom, my back pressed against the headboard. The house felt alive tonight, its creaks and groans sounding more deliberate than ever. My heart pounded in my chest, and my breath came in sharp, uneven bursts. I had barricaded my door with a chair, but it felt useless. Whatever was in this house didn't need doors to get to me. The journal lay open on my lap, its pages filled with frantic scribbles. The final entry changed again. The words "It's your turn" scrawled in red ink that seemed to glisten even in the dim light. My fingers trembled as I flipped through the pages, the handwriting growing more erratic with each turn. The last owner had written about rituals, about summoning something and failing to contain it. They had tried to warn me, but I hadn't listened. Now, it was too late. A loud thud echoed from downstairs, making me jump. My phone, which I had left charging on the nightstand, suddenly buzzed. I hesitated before picking it up, my heart sinking when I saw the caller ID, unknown. I silenced it, but it buzzed again, and again, and again. "Leave me alone," I shouted, hurling the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a crack, the screen flickering before going dark. I buried my face in my hands, trying to calm myself down. But the air felt thick, heavy, and I could swear I heard my name being whispered. "Emily, Emily, Emily." The voice was low, raspy, and it seemed to come from all around me. I lowered my hands slowly. The room was quiet now. The only sound was my own ragged breathing. But then I heard 3 slow, deliberate knocks again. This time they weren't coming from outside. They were coming from the wall beside my bed. I froze, my eyes fixed on the wall. The knocking stopped, and for a moment, there was silence. Then a faint scratching sound began, like fingernails dragging across wood. My stomach twisted into knots as I threw off the covers and scrambled to the other side of the bed. That was when I saw it. A shadow, tall and impossibly thin, seeping through the cracks in the wall. I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat like something alive. The shadow moved, its edges curling and twisting as if it were a living thing. It poured through the wall, filling the room with an icy, unnatural cold. I could see my breath now, puffs of fog in the air. The shadow took shape, forming into something vaguely human. Its presence was suffocating, pressing down on me like a physical weight. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. All I could do was sit there, frozen, as it stepped closer. The lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. The room plunged into darkness, and I was alone with the shadow. I heard its voice then, a low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate in my bones. "It's your turn," it said. "It's your turn." I screamed again, but my voice was drowned out by the sound of my own heart. The shadow reached out, its formless hand extended toward me. I raised my hands to defend myself, but it was no use. The darkness closed in, wrapping around me like a shroud. And then, everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the floor, the room bathed in the faint light of dawn. The chair I had used to barricade the door was still in place. The journal was still clutched in my hand. But something was wrong. The air felt different, lighter, as if the weight of the house had been lifted. I stumbled to my feet, my legs trembling. I pushed open the door, half expecting to find the shadow waiting for me. But the hallway was empty. I moved from room to room, each one quiet and still. The knocking had stopped. The whispers had stopped. The house was silent. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of relief. Maybe it was over. Maybe I survived. But as I reached the front door, I noticed something. The journal was still in my hand, but the final entry had changed again. It now read, "It's your turn." The new owner. The house waited again. Days passed and the street was quiet, as if the world had forgotten about the small 2-story home with its overgrown backyard. But one morning, a real estate sign appeared on the lawn, swinging gently in the breeze like a grim welcome. "For sale," it read in bold red letters. Below that, in smaller print, a steal. Mrs. Holloway, the same real estate agent who had sold the house to the protagonist, stood outside, her hands trembling as she locked the front door. She glanced over her shoulder as if she expected something to be watching her from the shadows. "It's a good deal," she muttered to herself. "The best deal in town." A week later, a young woman named Emily pulled into the driveway. She was in her early 20s, her hair tied back in a ponytail, her eyes wide with excitement. She had just graduated from college and was looking for a place to start her life. The house was perfect, not too big, not too small, and the price was unbelievably low. "Are you sure about this?" her friend Jenna asked, frowning as she stepped out of the car. "The house looks creepy." "It's just old," Emily said, smiling. "Besides, it's got character. And think about all the money I'll save." Jenna shook her head but followed Emily up the path to the front door. Mrs. Holloway was already there, jangling the keys nervously. "So, you're interested in the house?" she asked, her voice too cheerful. "Yes," Emily said. "It's exactly what I'm looking for. But can you tell me anything about the previous owners? The last one, did they leave suddenly or something?" Mrs. Holloway hesitated, glancing at the house as if it might hear her. "Oh no, nothing like that. Just a family that moved away. You know how it is." Emily raised an eyebrow but didn't press the issue. Jenna, however, noticed the real estate agent's odd behavior. "Is something wrong with the house?" she asked bluntly. Mrs. Holloway forced a laugh. "Oh, nothing. Nothing at all. It's a wonderful home. You'll love it here." As they stepped inside, Emily felt a strange chill run down her spine. The air inside the house felt heavy, as if it had been waiting for her. She shrugged it off, blaming it on the draft from the open door. But as she walked through the empty rooms, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. That night, as Emily unpacked her boxes, she found something strange in the basement. It was an old leather-bound journal tucked away in a corner. She flipped through the pages, frowning at the frantic handwriting. The last entry was dated a year ago, and it read, "Do not answer the knocks. Do not say his name. If you do, he will come." At the bottom, in fresh ink, someone had scrawled, "I am still here." Emily's heart raced. "Who wrote this?" she whispered to herself. She didn't realize she was holding her breath until her phone buzzed in her pocket, making her jump. It was Jenna. "Hey," Jenna said. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay. That house really gives me the creeps." "I'm fine," Emily said, trying to sound calm. "I just found this weird journal in the basement. It's probably just some crazy person who lived here before. Be careful, okay?" Jenna said. "If anything weird happens, call me." As they hung up, Emily glanced at the journal again. The words seemed to leap off the page, and for a moment she could swear the letters shifted, rearranging themselves. She blinked and they were back to normal. "It's just my imagination," she told herself. But as she went to bed that night, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was not alone. 3 nights passed and everything seemed normal. But on the 4th night at exactly 3 a.m., the knocking started. Knock, 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 knock out. Emily sat up in bed, her heart pounding. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling. No one answered. She threw off the covers and crept at the door. The hallway was dark and the knocking grew louder, as if it were coming from the walls themselves. Emily's breath came in short gasps as she stepped into the hallway. And then she saw it. A shadow, tall and thin. It stretched across the wall like a living thing. It moved closer and Emily froze, her blood cold in her veins. As the shadow loomed over her, she heard a voice, low, raspy, and inhuman. "Emily," it whispered, "it's your turn." She tried to scream, but her voice caught in her throat. The shadow reached out and everything went black. The next morning, Jenna called Emily's phone. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again and again, but there was no answer. Finally, she drove to the house. The front door was open, and the journal lay on the floor, its pages fluttering as if caught in an invisible breeze. The last entry had changed. Now it read, "It's your turn." Jenna's eyes widened as she read the words. She turned to leave, but as she did, she heard the sound of footsteps. Light, deliberate footsteps coming from upstairs. And then the knocking started again. Knock, knock, Not. The house waited no more. It had found its new owner.